Part 39. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 382. After all the men were knocked down by a certain Chuyuni, the assistants, and Yoshida had determined that if they wanted to know the follow-up content of the comic Clannad, it was absolutely impossible to confront Makoto Takahashi head-on. If you want to know the follow-up content, you can only start from other aspects. For example, acting cute, acting coquettishly, etc., these unconventional tricks should have been commonly used by Lolita, Shota, and girls in love. However, in order to know the follow-up content of the comic Clannad, under the leadership of Yoshidachi, everyone on the assistant side also embarked on the road of immorality, and practiced these tricks one by one. Even later, a few people who had completely smashed their moral integrity and swallowed it actually used the Beautiful Man and Beauty Rouge powder strategy. A legendary level skill, needless to say, the result is that these tricks have little effect on a powerful person. Sure enough, the so-called powerful does not only refer to physical ability or force, but more importantly, the soul and mind. Someone who is unfazed by any temptation and is determined to be a devil is undoubtedly a powerful being. Of course, the assistant side has not yet considered using a strike to coerce Takahashi Makoto. However, considering the number of manga manuscripts completed some time ago, this idea was rejected by everyone just after it was proposed by a certain uncle. Got it? More importantly, this approach has violated the original intention of everyone on the assistant side. The most important reason why someone allowed his assistant and editor Yoshida to join forces was, of course, to get pleasure from it. For example, he died of illness in front of the hospital when he was about to achieve his goal. Someone said that he really liked seeing this kind of scene and liked the entertainment activities very much. However, after trying several times to no avail, and seeing his helpless side, he finally reluctantly chose to return to his daily routine and complete the comic draft in a satisfactory manner, and this also made someone unhappy, very unhappy. Hey! Are you going to give in like this? They are really a bunch of spineless guys. Someone is talking about you, the little friend of Takahashi Makoto, the devilish second grader. Glancing at his assistant who was working hard to complete the manga manuscript, Takahashi Makoto curled his lips helplessly and complained resentfully, "How about trying again? The last time I asked Ryoko to wear women's clothing, I almost failed. The defense is broken. It's really only a little bit close. Please don't talk, Mr. Phoenix Academy, while you are working. This will easily interfere with the quality of the comics we complete." The handsome guy Ruko Jinghi River named by Makoto Takahashi looked at his colleagues with helpless and resentful eyes. Complained to Takahashi Makoto angrily, "And Mr. Phoenix Institute, you don't have to use inducements anymore. The same tricks are useless to all of us. What's more, if you want to watch the later content of Clannad, you only need to work hard to complete the previous accumulation. Comic manuscript, that way you can. The same tricks and so on. I originally thought, Lyoze, that you were a scheming man like Yagamayu, but I didn't expect you to be an unbeatable fighting man like the five Xiaoqiang. This is evolution. Is there a mistake in the direction? Or?" Regarding Jinghi's speech, Takahashi Makoto stopped mid-sentence. After pondering for a moment, a look of surprise suddenly appeared on his face. "Oh. So that's it. Is the method used in this attack the legendary Iceberg Man's special skill contrast cuteness when it comes to gaining favorability? It's dangerous. I almost got captured by this scheming boy like you, Lyoze. If you can learn the magical move of Little Jingfei Pen, can you cause one-hit kill damage to a certain middle-class cartoonist?" Jinghi classmate feels melancholy. Jingakun is right. We have learned very clearly about Cheng's bad nature during this period of time, Aoi Ueno said through gritted teeth while outlining the lines with a brush, "And Cheng, you from the beginning, there was no plan for us to watch the follow-up content of Clannad. Because you didn't pay the corresponding price, and you still want to get, huh? Don't forget the rules of equal exchange. Faced with Ueno Aoi who suddenly came online, Takahashi Makoto did not enter because of the so-called heart of compassion. In a state of silence, he looked at the angry female assistant with interest, and do you really think so? If Kanagisa-chan doesn't come back to life later, I swear I will never look at you scumbag Makoto again. It's a comic, wasn't it full of energy when I said this? But who was it that was crying with Mayuri afterwards? How about pretending that reversal impulse occurs after the origin awakens, and divides someone's scum into 17 by the way? Miss Aoi Ueno, who just came online, is now in a state of invisibility. Tintin, who originally wanted to speak, saw the miserable situation of the two people in front of him, opened and closed his mouth several times, and finally chose to remain silent, lowering his head and silently drawing the cartoon. Uncle Ding Ding, who has rich life experience, understands the principle of dead Taoist friends don't die poor Taoists more skillfully than everyone here. Of course, a certain bug secondary cartoonist with a golden finger is not included in the scope of the discussion. As for Mayuri, this poor naturally stupid girl burst into tears just once when she read the manga manuscript. After that, she finally plucked up the courage to come back to work. However, she was used by some crazy cartoonist to cooperate with the manga manuscript. Listening to music, I was mentally tortured again. Hey, Chen, have you finished the content behind Clannad? Compared with the sluggish assistants and everyone, Yoshida looks extremely good today, both in mood and condition. Of course, it's not finished, although he noticed something abnormal about Yoshida. Takahashi Makoto didn't pay too much attention, but looking at Yoshida's happy mood, Takahashi Makoto suddenly felt a little depressed. Sure enough, it was because of Yoshida the current situation is not going according to the script of His Majesty the Phoenix Academy, the only true god in the world, right? Forget it then, Chen, just take your time and draw. I'm really looking forward to the next content. As if he thought of something interesting, the smile on Yoshida's face became even brighter. But speaking of it, Clannad after the plot is matched with music, the tear-jerking effect is indeed quite powerful. Chen, why are you looking at me like that? After staring at Yoshida for a long time, Makoto Takahashi thought of a certain possibility. He took out his mobile phone with some anticipation, quickly pressed a series of numbers, and then walked to the balcony alone to answer the phone. Although Yoshida was full of curiosity about Takahashi Makoto's weird behavior, after considering the lying corpse experience in the past few days, Yoshida decisively stopped peeping and only dared to observe Takahashi Makoto's expression through the window. That's true, Makoto Takahashi's call ended quickly. He turned the phone flexibly with his fingers and looked at Yoshida with a smile. Hey, my beloved cat, you are really an interesting guy. Chen, why do you say that? Yoshida stuttered, obviously feeling guilty. By the way, Yoshida, what did you do before? It is said that Miss Kang Shuhong, under the instigation of a certain editor and a certain cartoonist, listened to certain music while observing the comic Clannad, and then, according to the pleasure described by the little sea otter, with an explosive tone, I can see that Miss Kang Shuhong is currently being held in the arms of the little sea otter and being comforted. Makoto Takahashi showed a happy look on his face, and continued to Yoshida who looked a little embarrassed. Well, my familiar cats, you should know what I want to say, right? Using comics to increase your favorability, in a sense, you are really awesome. Yes, I'm sorry. Although I can get the limited edition of Clannad music in advance, I really shouldn't. That's not what I'm talking about. Makoto Takahashi slammed the table excitedly, and his voice instantly increased several times. Hey, my beloved cat, it seems you still don't understand. Not this, then. Why didn't you tell me such an interesting and fun thing? You selfish guy. Makoto Takahashi can be described as full of resentment at this moment. There is a black aura wrapped around his body, and the resentment has indeed materialized. And let's not talk about your selfish behavior. Even if you want to play, you must play it thoroughly. I just confirmed through the phone that the personality of this little sea otter has not been broken. My beloved cat, you should be ashamed of your incompetence. Yes, indeed. Yashida's mouth began to twitch madly. No, 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 play with others to reach the degree of personality. This kind of thing should not be ashamed and should not be ashamed. Therefore, in view of your selfish and incompetent behavior, my beloved cat, you won't have a share in tonight's feast. Makoto Takahashi showed a look of sympathy on his face and spread his hands helplessly. Tonight I will go on an expedition with the King of Black Flame. In addition to the servants of the King of Black Flame, I will also have Sabas-chen as my escort and driver. That's basically the situation. Going to war? This word is really subtle. Seeing Makoto Takahashi's look of anticipation when he mentioned this matter, Yashida's heart that had just been relieved suddenly rose again. Isn't it true that you guys are? Do you want to discuss the new comics in the evening? Hey. The perception ability is unexpectedly strong at this time, my beloved cat. Makoto Takahashi turned his head and complained unhappily, but when he thought about Yashida not being able to witness that scene at night, he immediately smiled and said, but so what if you know? You can't enter without an invitation. Eh? Isn't this impossible? And as your editor, isn't it natural for you to review your new comics, Cheng? Although we are talking about comics, the real purpose of this trip is just to let the King of Black Flame feel that existence up close so that I can draw works that resonate with the soul in the future, Makoto Takahashi said on the side. He quickly sent messages on his mobile phone while arousing Yashida's curiosity, and the editor in charge is also a servant of the King of Black Flame. In a sense, Yujiro will cry when he hears such comments. You will definitely cry. After all, the author of this comic is Shinkai Makoto, who is known as one of the two scumbags by readers. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Male. Chapter 383. Although we are discussing the content of the new manga tonight, but... Yujiro raised his watch and looked at the time, with a look of helplessness and confusion on his face. After opening and closing his mouth several times, he finally couldn't help but bow his head to that side. Eiji Nyaizuma, who was painting, asked, Hey, Nyaizuma-kun, are you sure the time the Phoenix Academy teacher said was 6 o'clock in the evening? Of course. I'm super looking forward to this, so it's impossible to remember the time wrong. Normally, Eiji Nyaizuma, who was drawing comics, would definitely ignore the questions from his editor in charge, but when he thought about tonight's event, Nyaizuma Eiji said that he was in a bit of a mess. When he was finishing the manga draft, he didn't have the usual superlative concentration. By the way, where are you going at night? I just heard you say before that you can see the real thing in the comics at night. Searched can on Google. This is a secret that cannot be told. Even if the target is Yujiro-san, I have an agreement with the Phoenix Academy teacher. But even if none of you say anything now, I will know it tonight. Yujiro looked at his new wife, Eiji, with eyes full of endless resentment. While Takahashi Makoto hasn't arrived yet, Yujiro is trying hard to get some useful information from his new wife Eiji. Hey, new wife-kun, it doesn't matter if you reveal it a little bit, right? Dudu. If you can't say it, Nyaizuma Eiji crossed his hands on his chest. Teacher from the Phoenix Institute said that if I had told Yujiro-san in advance, he would not send me an invitation to such an interesting event next time. Yes. So you understand? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Hey, Yujiro looked at the excited look on his new wife Eiji's face, sighed helplessly, and muttered in a low voice, I always feel that there will be some danger tonight. Is it an illusion? Although as the editor in charge, you should not interfere too much in the private life of cartoonists, but this time is different. According to Yujiro's understanding of Takahashi Makoto and Nitsuma Eiji, These two guys are definitely the kind of guys who are afraid of chaos in the world, so some very scary things will definitely happen at night. After all, you can just come to Eiji Shinzuma's house or Makoto Takahashi's place to discuss new comics, so there's no need to go out of your way, right? Oh, are you here? At exactly 6 o'clock, Eiji's cell phone placed next to the desk began to vibrate desperately. Teacher Moxie Phoenix Academy. Hey, King of Black Flame, are you ready? At Yuichiro's signal, Eiji Shinzuma turned on the speakerphone. Take your servants and get to location A first. You have 5 minutes. Time, I will give you the next step of instructions when we get there, above. Place A? Got it. As soon as Eiji Nyaizuma finished speaking, Takahashi Makoto's phone was hung up. Place A is. Yujiro said that he didn't understand the exchange between the two at all. Looking at Eiji Nyaizuma, who was quickly packing his things over there, he asked with a twitching corner of his mouth, "Hey, Nyaizuma-kun, that place is." Yujiro-san, you don't know. Eiji Nyaizuma looked at his editor in charge in shock. Except for the fact that his voice was slightly too high due to shock, Yujiro could feel the contempt in Eiji Nyaizuma's tone. Place A is, of course, the abbreviation of Alice Catgirl Maid Cafe. As an editor, Yujiro-san, you don't even know that place. As expected, as the teacher from the Phoenix Institute said, the editor also started fallen. I'm so sorry for not knowing that place. Yujiro looked at his new wife Eiji with a hoarse face, put his hand on his forehead, and said with deep regret in his tone, "It's my fault. Everything is wrong. It's my fault. Yes, everything is my fault. We shouldn't let Shinzuma-kun, a guy with some problems to begin with, be overly exposed to the Chuyunibu mangaka from the Phoenix Institute. Now looking at Shinzuma-kun like this, it's obvious that someone has made her even more difficult to deal with." Ignoring Yuichiro, who was still immersed in self-blame, after his new wife Eiji finished preparing, she went out in high spirits. According to Brother Ding of a certain family, the truest and purest purpose of men going to drink wine and listen to ditties is to find inspiration for composing poems and songs. In the same way, although Yuichiro was quite suspicious of the mysterious behavior of the two problematic cartoonists, in the face of the lofty fact that all this is to better complete the manga manuscript, Yujiro is completely powerless to refute and can only act as a follower to witness and record everything that is about to happen. Although the agreed time was 6 o'clock in the evening, when Yujiro and his new wife Eiji actually saw Takahashi Makoto, it was already close to 7 o'clock. I've said it before, it's not that I'm dissatisfied with your painting style, King of Black Flame, I just feel that the courage is a little lacking. Makoto Takahashi, who was sitting in the back row, was still dressed in a white coat, pointing with his hands. He was communicating with Eiji Shinzuma in a righteous manner, judging from the completion of the manga manuscript. King of Black Flame, you have a high degree of restoration of other characters, but this character. But Mr. Phoenix Institute also said that I am responsible for the specific comics. Eiji Nyaizuma pointed his finger a little aggrievedly, and these manga manuscripts are only based on the background of the novels provided by Mr. Phoenix Institute. I created by my own imagination. That's why I'm taking you to see the real thing today. Hee hee. Makoto Takahashi crossed his arms over his chest, closed his eyes, and laughed like a middle school student. Comics are high-end products that we have placed our passion, soul, and will on. Just relying on imagination is of course not enough. I see. Nizuma Eiji showed a look of realization on his face, with a gleam of expectation in his eyes. But should I say that you are worthy of being Mr. Fengguangai Yuan? You can even simulate that. There is no coincidence in this world, everything is inevitable. Makoto Takahashi opened his eyes and said as a matter of course, because the earth, no, the great will of the universe feels my thoughts, so everything happens. Why can you two chat as if nothing happened? Yujiro, who had been silent for a long time, finally started to explode after brewing for a long time since getting on the car. It's okay for Mr. Feng Guangai. Why are you so calm, Mr. Nazuma? Servant of the Black Flame King, you should feel honored to be able to participate in this feast tonight. Facing Yujiro's questioning, Takahashi Makoto looked at the resentful editor-in-chief with some surprise. But why do you exude a strong and ominous aura at this moment? You still have the nerve to say that, if it weren't for the fact that he was restrained by the seat belt at this moment. Yujiro said that even if he knew that he was far inferior to Makoto Takahashi in terms of martial arts, he would definitely want to fight Makoto Takahashi to the end. Yujiro remembered very clearly that he and Nazuma Eiji had finally arrived at Makoto Takahashi's so-called location A, which was the newly opened Alice Cat Girl Maid Cafe, and then received new instructions from Makoto Takahashi, and then continued to run towards the next designated location. The reason why it took almost an hour to successfully meet up with Makoto Takahashi was that a lot of time was spent on running. Of course, what Yujiro couldn't accept the most was that Takahashi Makoto was actually sitting in the car, following the two of them. What kind of devil are you, Takahashi Makoto? Tisk. The reason why I asked you to act like this is to stay alert. Takahashi Makoto narrowed his eyes and turned on the preaching mode to Yujiro, who looked angry. You must remember that when you live in the other world, you must stay alert whenever you go out. What's more, if you are at the level of me and the King of Black Flame, if you are not careful, you may not even see the sun tomorrow. So do you understand? The reason why I let you go around in circles is not to torture you or to play with you, but to get rid of the surveillance of some hostile forces through this method. Hostile strength. I really want to know, what kind of crazy guy would be so stupid to monitor you? Who the hell would be so bored to monitor you? Tisk, 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 too sweet. Takahashi Makoto shook his finger and looked at Yujiro with contempt. I don't know much about the Black Flame King. You know, I have a lot of tough enemies here. Organizations like my cats are just kids compared to them. I'm embarrassed that Yoshida-kun and I are in the same organization. Tisk. Don't act like you don't believe it at all. Takahashi Makoto looked at Yujiro with a look of ignorance. Is really fearlessness, based on our past experience, like Phantom Troop, Akatsuki, 7 Warlords of the Sea, Tendashu, Haru Same, Nura Group and Hero Association. These are considered to be relatively difficult large organizations. Oh. You can get away with it like this. You are worthy of being Mr. Howin. Nazuma Eiji, your editor-in-chief Yujiro will be unhappy if you make a final move like this. By the way, where are we going? Yujiro decided not to pay attention to Takahashi Makoto, and turned to ask the butler who had been driving silently. Also, since this is a new manga about Shinkai Makoto, why didn't Yoshida come along? And even the phone couldn't be reached. Mr. Yoshida is not feeling well today, so I will temporarily take over the duties of driver and guard. As if remembering Yoshida's previous performance, Sebastian looked in the rearview mirror at Takahashi Makoto, who was happily communicating with Shinzuma Eiji, and said with a smile, if the location you mentioned is correct, we should be there soon. Oh, aren't we here already? Huh? We're here? Looking at the brightly lit place not far away, Yujiro looked at the three people around him with a confused look. By the way, where is this place? Servant of the Black Flame King, ask a question. Please tell me the next comic of Makoto Shinkai within 3 seconds. Pulling his white coat, Makoto Takahashi looked at the figure not far away, and showed an expectant smile on his face. If you can't answer. It's a certain scientific railgun Kai. Although his tone was a little unconfident, Yujiro remembered this comic very clearly, and there was no reason for him to get it wrong. Correct answer. If you answer oh no, I forgot, or I don't know, then on the way back later, I will let you know the reason why my cat is absent today. Although Makoto Takahashi said it in a joking tone, Yujiro felt a chill. Hey, Phoenix Academy teacher, this is. He is also wearing a white coat, but compared to Takahashi Makoto, the man in front of him who exudes the charm of a mature man perfectly interprets the correct wearing of white coat way. Of course I can't tell you the identity of the other world. But the king of Black Flame, he is the real protagonist tonight, after Makoto Takahashi explained casually to his new wife Eiji and Yujiro beside him, he immediately went up to meet him, and said, the mature man in a white coat extended his right hand, long time no see, Professor. Takahashi Makoto, long time no see, the man in the white coat, whom Takahashi Makoto called a mature uncle, looked doubtfully at his new wife Eiji and Yujiro behind Takahashi Makoto. These two are. Well, that's what I mentioned to you before, the collaborator of a certain scientific railgun Kai, the king of Black Flame and his followers. Makoto Takahashi seemed unwilling to spend too much time introducing each other. Going straight to the point, so, Professor, can the experiment begin now? Well, the final debugging has just been completed. When talking about the experiment, the professor showed a slight smile on his face. Then let's start with the theory and simple experiments. Then I leave everything to you, Professor. The group of people followed the professor to the hut next to the experimental field. Takahashi Makoto and the professor were talking about something happily. Sabas-chan was like a guard, silently following Takahashi Makoto. Nyaizuma Eiji was looking around curiously. If Takahashi Makoto hadn't repeatedly reminded and threatened him, Eiji, the new wife, would have definitely started running around at this moment. By the way, what is this place? Yujiro, who was walking at the end, looked at the busy staff and the several fire trucks on standby. He felt more and more weird in his heart. He quickly stepped forward and grabbed his new wife Eiji, and asked, Hey, Shinzuma-kun, can you tell me now? What exactly do you want to do in a place like this at night? This is obviously a place for some kind of experiment, right? It doesn't seem to have much to do with comics, bar. Teacher from the Phoenix Institute, can I say it now, Eiji Nyaizuma is indeed a good boy who abides by his promise. Before answering Yujiro's question, he didn't forget to ask Makoto Takahashi for permission. Let me tell you, Makoto Takahashi stopped, walked in front of Yujiro, and asked with a smile, didn't you give me a hint before? The name of the new comic. A certain scientific electromagnetic gun, Kai. Wait. Science, electromagnetic gun. It turns out that Yujiro is not a very stupid type. After a moment of pondering, he immediately reacted, with a look of confusion on his face. With a look of confidence, hey, are you kidding me? You mean, this is... What, don't you already know? Makoto Takahashi nodded and admitted, the reason why I brought you here is to show you the so-called electromagnetic gun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao SD Mao. Chapter 384. The Railgun, as Misaka Mikoto's ultimate move and famous skill in Academy City, is quite famous in the two-dimensional world. Let's not talk about Misaka Mikoto's other typical moves, such as Iron Sand Sword, Thunderbolt, etc. When talking about this character, the first thing that comes to mind is of course Railgun. Taiwan novel network Rightward Arrow. Although Makoto Takahashi had already given part of the content of a certain science to Eiji Nyaizuma a long time ago, and Eiji Nyaizuma also spent a lot of time to complete a certain science besides completing his own manga drafts, but it was very difficult. Unfortunately, regarding Misaka Mikoto, Takahashi Makoto is not satisfied with every comic draft completed by Eiji Nyaizuma. Although other parts of the plot are very good, as for Gunsei, I still feel that something very important is missing as usual. This is what Makoto Takahashi gives every time Eiji Nyaizuma completes a manga draft. Evaluate. Although Yujiro believed that Takahashi Makoto's remarks were just used by a certain middle school student to deceive the new wife Eiji, The new wife Eiji agreed with Takahashi Makoto's statement. Every time he completes the manga draft for the appearance of Gunsama, he hands it over to Makoto Takahashi, and then is sent back to draw again. During this period, in addition to completing his own manga, Eiji Niizuma spent most of his time on Above a Certain Science. Days like this continue until today. The speed of the collided iron ball will double and become super high speed. After demonstrating it with a small iron ball and a wooden ship model, the man in a white coat, whom Takahashi Makoto called Professor, he picked up one of the small balls, walked to a tall piece of equipment, and introduced it to a dull editor and two cartoonists who were looking forward to it. This is a superconducting accelerator. Now let's try it out using the powerful magnetism of superconducting electromagnets. As I said before, although you have completed many manga manuscripts before, as the protagonist, Misaka Mikoto, you have not drawn the aura that belongs to Sister Gun. So, Makoto Takahashi he patted Eiji Niizuma on the shoulder hard, his tone full of encouragement and expectation. Hey, King of Black Flame, you must look more carefully later. Observe with your eyes, feel with your heart, remember with your soul, that really belongs to the power of the super railgun. Understood? I will definitely read it seriously. As if influenced by Makoto Takahashi, Eiji Niizuma did not use his usual tone when speaking, but gave a rare and serious answer. What's more, in order for me to draw a certain science, the teacher from the Phoenix Academy specially prepared such a scene. No, I think Phoenix Academy teacher shouldn't have this ability. Since Yoshida is absent today, the person responsible for complaining and throwing cold water is naturally the editor-in-chief Yujiro, who also belongs to the editorial side. Shinzuma-kun, please have some common sense. Do you think a normal cartoonist would spend a large amount of money on such an experiment in order to complete a certain comic? Stupid humans, don't judge me by the wisdom of ants like you. Makoto Takahashi seemed quite unhappy with Yujiro's words. He put his hands into the pockets of his white coat, and his face was filled with a look of madness reserved for enemies. His expression said, "Hey, you are a servant of the King of Black Flame, do you know? When I found out that Misaka Mikoto's outbreak in the A Certain Science comic draft completed by the King of Black Flame did not achieve the effect I expected, I was very melancholy. However, at this time, I received an invitation from the professor to observe the super electromagnetic gun experiment, so do you understand?" Ming, what do you understand? Is that kind of thing important? Yujiro said that he didn't know the logic of Shuyunibu, and he didn't want to know. When I have a desire for something, the world will adjust accordingly and make some things begin to develop in a direction that satisfies and pleases me. Makoto Takahashi became more and more excited as he spoke, and even started to laugh wildly. Standing up, ha 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 ha, that's right. Specifically, I hope that the King of Black Flame can watch a real super railgun, so this experiment by the professor. No, I think it's all just a coincidence. Yujiro looked at Makoto Takahashi with a hoarse face. Although he didn't spend a long time with a certain middle-class cartoonist, Yujiro now understands one thing. Being able to get along with a middle-class cartoonist like Takahashi Makoto for more than 10 years, and someone who is the editor-in-charge has not been killed, among his colleagues on the editorial side, how powerful is Yoshida? Accidental? Huh. Everything in this world is inevitable, there is no accident. Think about it carefully. As a professor with high-end talents, why would you think of inviting a cartoonist to observe such an experiment? Makoto Takahashi turned to look. Looking at a professor over there who was directing the personnel to retreat, abandon all unfounded speculations, there is always only one truth. This world responded to my desire or expectation, and completed my world by changing the world line. Sure enough, everything I say after coming to this world is not an accident, it is a choice of Stein's gate. That's what I said. I haven't even thought about this kind of thing. Yuichiro-san, you are really an idiot. Speaking of which, Eiji Niizuma, If you finish your attack like this, can Yujiro still communicate with you in a friendly way and have fun with you in the future? Although I have briefly explained the principle of the super railgun to a few people before, a theory is still a theory after all. The actual power still needs to be proven through practice. Yujiro was just about to refute Eiji Naizuma's statement. At that moment, a professor in a white coat spoke, "So, are you guys ready?" The professor raised his hand and motioned for everyone to take a look at the small steel ball used to explain the experimental principle before, and then gently placed the small steel ball on the special track. The small steel ball slowly slid downwards, and then entered the electromagnetic acceleration device, and then a shocking scene appeared. Yujiro only heard a whoosh sound, and seemed to see a shadow flying out of the front end of the accelerator device in a daze. Then he saw the experimental wall as a target not far away, and suddenly there was a violent explosion with flames shooting into the sky. Under the huge impact, the experimental wall was directly shattered. The wall that stood before has become a ruin and is burning at the moment. Who is the stunned person? Of course, it was Yujiro, a certain editor-in-chief who had always lived in a peaceful world and had never seen such a huge weapon. Oh! This is super powerful. Naiizuma Eiji looked at the burning ruins over there. After being stunned for a moment, he immediately cheered, "So this is the power of the super railgun." It is indeed the same as the previous Phoenix. The teacher at the hospital described it the same way. No, it should be more gorgeous. Humph. Isn't this gorgeous? Remember this moment, Lord of Black Flame. In this way, you should be able to complete an excellent comic draft, right? Makoto Takahashi looked at the high-energy scene in front of him. His face he showed a pleasant smile. Sure enough, explosions are art. Drink, ha ha ha. Diodara, no, it should be the Phoenix Academy teacher. Can you please stop staring at me when you say such things? Yujiro was a little embarrassed by Takahashi Makoto's stare. After that although I really hope to have a physical stalemate with the King of Black Flame, but I have made an appointment with Rin-chan before, and I will go to the dream world to capture a lower-level demon named Frandy at night. So. Makoto Takahashi raised his hand to look at his watch and spread his hands helplessly. It's almost time to go home. Eh? Are you going back like this? Seeing Takahashi Makoto take action directly, Yujiro turned to look at the scientist in a white coat who was communicating with a lady on the edge of the experimental site, and asked with some confusion, "No need, do you want to thank the professor over there? After all, he..." Huh? Thank you. Why? Makoto Takahashi stopped and looked at Yujiro with some confusion. Professor Yukawa doesn't care about these worldly things. Besides, if you want to say thank you now, blah. I have no interest in doing it. There is an existence that shines in the dark. And if you interrupt the scientist's state, you will definitely be sent to another dimension in the future, at least until I pass the title of Demon King to Rin-chan. Takahashi Makoto, are you leaving? Seeing Takahashi Makoto and others preparing to leave, Professor Yukawa interrupted his reading collaboration to solve cases and writing dating to increase favorability with a certain lady and walked straight over. The experiment was completed very well, but how do you feel? Did you find the answer you wanted? In a sense, it is of great reference value. Who said there was no need to say thank you before? But, it's better to forget it. Professor, we can't thank you enough for your help. Huh? Are there any other questions? Just like what Takahashi Makoto described, Professor Yukawa did not care about the so-called politeness issues. Instead, after listening to Takahashi Makoto's words, he frowned and asked, "Although the comics I don't know much about it, but from the tone of your voice, Makoto Takahashi, it sounds like you still have some questions. It's just some detailed settings, not to mention the rest of it, but it's the scope of the manga artist." Looking at Professor Yukawa's confused look, Takahashi Makoto bowed slightly. "Man. Professor. We have already provided such great assistance, please leave the rest to us. Then, don't interrupt the professor and the ladies' time to refresh each other's favorability. I think Mr. Takahashi Makoto, you may have misunderstood something, right? Professor Yukawa looked at the guy in front of him who was also wearing a white coat, with a helpless expression on his face. In this case, I hope you can complete a certain scientific research as soon as possible. The comics of electromagnetic Gunkai. Hey, Mr. Yukawa, so the suspect is. The lady mentioned by a middle school student seemed to have recovered from her previous days, and ran towards Professor Yukawa from a distance. Suspect, after Yujiro vaguely heard a certain sensitive word, he turned to look at Takahashi Makoto and asked with some surprise, "Teacher from the Phoenix Academy, did I hear it wrong? I seem to have heard it just now. Servant of the King of Black Flame, are you going to change your career to be the agent of death?" In Takahashi Makoto's understanding, detective is equivalent to death agent. After looking Yujiro up and down, Takahashi Makoto shook his head sympathetically, "Let's forget it. I don't feel the aura of death entanglement from you. It's impossible for you to become a detective. Just stay honest." Squat at the gate on the editorial side, "Uncle. Uncle, this title is even more exaggerated than Servant of the Black Flame King." Yujiro, who had just celebrated his 32nd birthday, was melancholy. "Hey, Black Flame King, I think you should understand now." Ignoring Yujiro's tangled face, Takahashi Makoto turned to look at Eiji Nazuma, who had remained silent. "What exactly is missing in the comic draft of A Certain Science?" "Well, I understand it roughly." Eiji Nazuma came out of his trance state, looked up and looked directly at Makoto Takahashi. "Although it's hard to express, I already understand what to draw and how to draw it. Teacher Feng Guangai Yuan, thank you very much. Yeah, good eyes. But it's too early to say anything now. The result or something, we still have to wait until the comic draft is completed to judge." Makoto Takahashi walked in front of Eiji Nazuma, raised his hand and put it on the other's shoulder. "Speaking of the Black Flame King, now Aho Mumuha seems to have put all the focus on the monthly serialized PCP, so." "Monthly? Oh, I see." As if thinking of something, the expression on Nazuma Eiji's face became fanatical. "In that case. Well, when the tear-jerking chapter of Clannad ends, do it the way you like." Takahashi Makoto squinted his right eye and smiled. "When it was serialized weekly before, I was very taken care by Aho Mumuha. So, this time it's our turn to fight back." Takahashi Makoto, you and Nazuma Eiji are so synchronized. It turns out that the resentment of losing to Aho Mumuha before is quite big. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Sde Mao. Chapter 385. The hand holding the brush began to tremble due to the pain caused by long-term work. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. When he usually finished the comics, Eiji Naji was used to making strange noises, but now his mouth was dry and his throat was hoarse. Originally, as a cartoonist who worked at home, it was normal for him to look pale because he was not exposed to ultraviolet rays for a long time, but now, because he did not rest well, Eiji Naji's face looked frighteningly pale. The soreness of his arms and the dryness of his throat, these feelings, called physiological sensations, were all reminding Eiji Naji that his body was about to reach its limit. But the cartoonist named Eiji Naizuma did not stop his work because of this. He just held the brush and worked hard to paint. The comics scattered around the table proved that Eiji Naizuma was completing the comics at an astonishing speed during this period, and according to the principle of equivalent exchange, Eiji Naizuma sacrificed a lot of rest time and physical health to complete these comics. Since watching A Certain Scientific Railgun, Eiji Naizuma has entered such a crazy rhythm when he came back. Is it really the rhythm of no madness, no life? Although I can understand your eagerness to complete A Certain Science, this is not okay. Yujiro sorted out the messy comics around the table and persuaded Eiji Naizuma, who was drawing again. Hey, Nizuma-kun, take a break. Yada. I refuse. As stubborn as a tantrum child, Nizuma Eiji decisively and willfully rejected Yujiro's proposal, and did not stop working on the comic manuscript because of talking. Although Howin teacher said there is no rush to finish it, I still want to finish it early. But don't you still have weekly comics now? Yujiro tried to persuade Nizuma Eiji in a different direction, serializing weekly and monthly at the same time, this kind of thing. I can do it, this kind of thing, of course I can do it. Nizuma Eiji seemed to have understood what Yujiro wanted to say, and gave a predictive answer one step ahead of time. Since Howin teacher can serialize Clannad and Dream Eater at the same time, then this kind of thing I can do as well. Calm down, Nizuma-kun. I think competing with monsters like Howin Kuma in physical strength is completely a kind of abuse. Yujiro said that he was no longer able to complain about Nizuma Eiji's thoughts at the moment. It is good to have the awareness that if others can do it, there is no reason why I can't do the same thing, but the premise is to distinguish the object of comparison, right? According to the information obtained from Yoshida before, the physical strength of a certain Chuyunibun cartoonist is definitely at the level of Demon King or out of human. Competing with monsters that should be exiled to the demon world to fight demon kings and heroes is not a wise behavior no matter how you look at it. A real man, Nizuma Eiji rarely ignored Yujiro while completing the comic manuscript. His eyes were shining brightly, and he replied to Yujiro very seriously, although I always thought that Yojimura sensei was my lifelong rival, but in the process of completing the comic manuscript, I realized that the one I really wanted to fight was indeed Howin sensei. So, serializing monthly and weekly magazines at the same time, it's not something you have to work hard to do, but something you have to do. Because, a certain scientific railgun. Swish, swish, swish. Although I really want to persuade Nizuma-kun to take a good rest, but looking at your current state, it's probably useless to persuade him. Looking at Nizuma Eiji's completely dry face, seeing that me was not going to move, Yujiro spread his hands helplessly. Okay, I won't stop you, Nizuma-kun. Oh, you are surprisingly reasonable at this time, Yujiro-san. Nizuma Eiji was obviously a little surprised by Yujiro's attitude at this moment. He dipped the tracing pen in the ink and began to complete the comic draft while asking Yujiro, if it were any other time, Yujiro-san would definitely try his best to stop me, and even use such a brutal killing move as summoning editor-in-chief. Yujiro-san, like today, tisk tisk tisk, is your brain really broken? Nizuma-kun, I'm talking to you. Gnashing teeth and full of black lines, no matter which one, it shows the anger of the speaker at this moment. However, when the two appear together in the same person, through the principle of negative and negative equals positive, it shows that at this time, although the speaker is full of anger, he is trying to endure and suppress the wild flood power in his body that is about to run away because of various conditions and restrictions. I think you're just like that guy Howin Kuma, you're completely broken. Of course, without denying Yujiro's guess and inference, Nizuma Eiji lowered his head and began to speed up the completion of the comic, muttering to himself in a voice that Yujiro could hardly hear, if you want to defeat the great demon king, the first thing you have to do is to keep working hard and move forward in the direction of a brave man. After repeatedly suggesting that Nizuma Eiji take a good rest to no avail, Yujiro completely understood the truth that the one who tied the bell must untie it. Although he was unwilling to meet Takahashi Makoto, he had no choice but to find Takahashi Makoto, both as the editor-in-chief and as Nizuma Eiji's friend. I see, a roundabout way to save the country. After listening to Yujiro's narration, Takahashi Makoto stopped painting and turned to look at the terrified Yujiro over there. Then, servant of the Black Flame King, let's not talk about whether I am willing to stop the Black Flame King. What is the price you can pay? Huh? Price? Does this kind of thing still need a price? Yujiro looked at Takahashi Makoto with a puzzled look, and his expression was obviously saying, did I hear it wrong just now? After confirming that he didn't hear it wrong, Yujiro almost bit his tongue, looked at Takahashi Makoto in disbelief, and asked with difficulty, "Aren't you, friends? At this time, shouldn't you be?" "Huh? Friends?" Takahashi Makoto looked at Yujiro in surprise. "Servant of the Black Flame King, when did you have this wrong perception?" "Friends, don't make me laugh. But aren't you serializing the comics together under the name Makoto Shinkai?" In Yujiro's understanding, two people who can create comics together should be considered friends, right? The best proof of this view is. You mean to talk about Yajo Mumanjai? Tisk. Are the relationship between Landai and Huangmao glasses considered friends? They are blatant gay friends. Don't confuse the definition of friends and gay friends. Takahashi Makoto seemed to be quite indignant about Yujiro's misunderstanding, and slammed the table fiercely. "Regarding the definition of friends, you can go to my cat to find relevant documents. Holding such a childish and naive idea, are you really the servant of the Black Flame King? And if you want to get something, you must pay something, but this is common sense in this world." But even Yoshida, who has the title of Venomous Tongue on the editor's side, is not Takahashi Makoto's opponent, let alone Yujiro. As expected, Nyaizuma Eiji's evaluation is correct. Yujiro's IQ is indeed worrying. "Hey, servant of the King of Black Flame, answer me a question." Makoto Takahashi stopped painting brush and started dancing again, but this did not hinder the conversation between the two. "King, are you arrogant?" "Huh?" Yujiro said that he could not keep up with the thinking of a certain middle school cartoonist at all. With a look of help, he turned his head and looked at his colleague beside him, Yoshida, who had remained silent since entering the door. But unfortunately, Yoshida seemed to want to remain silent today. Facing Yujiro's look of help, he just spread his hands helplessly, and then continued to observe some of the comics of a certain science in his hand. Yoshida, who had missed the experiment of a certain scientific railgun before, can only make up for the regret of missing it with the comics in his hand. The king is above all people, sitting on the throne and looking down at the people. Because he has the kingship, he has already decided to be accompanied by loneliness. Although Takahashi Makoto made the statement in a very calm tone, both Yoshida, who was reading the comics, and Yujiro, who was listening carefully, could feel the trembling of the soul when a certain Chuyunibunaga cartoonist spoke. "The so-called king is stronger than anyone else, greedier than anyone else, stands higher than anyone else, and sees farther than anyone else. However, the price to pay is the so-called loneliness. The king can be admired and worshipped by the people, and can also be praised and admired by the people, but the king must be lonely, because this is the king's destiny. This is the price to pay for becoming a king." That. Although it sounds a bit reasonable, but what does this have to do with Eiji Nyaizuma desperately drawing comics? Yujiro looked at Takahashi Makoto with a stupid look on his face, trying to interrupt Takahashi Makoto, but before Yujiro could open his mouth, he was sniped by Takahashi Makoto. "So, servant of the Black Flame King, do you understand now?" Takahashi Makoto pulled the brush down heavily, finished the last stroke of the character line, and then threw the brush aside, and then said, "It's not that I don't want to help the Black Flame King, but because all this is the king's fate. The so-called king does not need friends or anything, as long as he is firm in his will and moves towards the desired goal. So, do you still need to consider that kind of thing? Humph. Don't be ridiculous. Compared to the pain of the soul when giving up the existence that you have always believed in and pursued, whether the body can bear it is nothing. It's just to complete the comics. Cheng, aren't you exaggerating a bit?" Ding ding, who came to work overtime today to complete the comics, stopped the brush at this moment and intervened in the conversation. However, after seeing the strange smile on Takahashi Makoto's face, Tintin immediately felt a chill. Although he now realized that he shouldn't have intervened in the conversation, it seemed too late. Helpless Tintin had to bite the bullet and continue to add, "And Cheng, Yujiro-san is also thinking about Eiji Nyaizuma." If Eiji Niizuma falls ill because of this, it will delay the progress of the manga A Certain Science. Takahashi Makoto did not retaliate against Tintin, who suddenly interrupted the conversation. He simply pointed to the pile of unfinished comics on the table and asked Uncle Tintin to continue working. Tintin showed a sad and angry expression on his face. After giving Yujiro a look that said, "I can only help you up to this point," he picked up the comics on the table like an abandoned woman, sighed and continued to work. Respect the will of the king. Since you are the king's servant, no matter what path the king takes, you should follow the king without hesitation, instead of becoming a roadblock or an obstacle when the king is moving forward. You are not worthy of being the king's servant. After sending Uncle Tintin away, Takahashi Makoto turned to Yujiro and continued what he had just said. Title: My cat servants. When I was moving forward, although sometimes they would complain like common people, they never tried to stop me, because my cat servants believed in me and were willing to follow me. So compared to my cat servants, you, the servant of the King of Black Flame, are still far behind. Yoshida, who was praised by Makoto Takahashi, silently lowered his head and looked at the comic manuscript, but his heart was like 1,000 grass mud horses whistling through. It's not that I don't want to stop you, but every time I want to stop you, no, even just when I just put forward some opinions, I can feel the murderous aura of Makoto Takahashi that breaks through the sky. Although the words are a bit exaggerated and the tone is a bit unpleasant, Yujiro can't refute what Makoto Takahashi said. Although from the perspective of the editor-in-chief, Yujiro still does not agree with the behavior of Eiji Niizuma, but what if it is from the perspective of the cartoonist? Whether it's the determination to fight to the end with the opponent, or the unwillingness of others can do it but I can't, is it just the manga draft of A Certain Science that Niizuma Eiji worked so hard to complete? No, it's not just that, right? The reason why Niizuma Eiji worked so hard and even tried his best to complete the manga draft is because Niizuma Eiji knows the gap between himself and Takahashi Makoto. If he can't even do what Takahashi Makoto once did, then how can he duel? If he can't do what Takahashi Makoto once did, then what qualifications do he have to initiate a duel? Maybe I shouldn't have come to Takahashi Makoto today. I should have. Oh. It seems that the editorial staff are not completely useless. Takahashi Makoto looked at Yujiro, who was gradually coming out of the self-reflection state, and a teachable smile appeared on his face. Hey, servant of the King of Black Flame. It seems that you have understood it? Then can you answer my previous question? King, are you arrogant? Yujiro said that he still couldn't answer. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 386. Originally, according to Makoto Takahashi's original plan, after the comic Clannad completed the achievement of readers burst into tears in the monthly magazine, he would cooperate with Eiji Niizuma to start completing the comic A Certain Science, which would be published in weekly and monthly magazines. They plan to fall in love and kill each other, and enter the preparation stage of Shattered Void. Although the name Makoto Shinkai can confuse readers, but fundamentally speaking, the person who completed the manga manuscript is still the high-ranking person who is serializing it in the weekly. Chiao Cheng and his new wife Eiji. However, after Eiji Arizuma observed the railgun experiment, he suddenly turned on the passionate mode and tried his best to complete the manga manuscript of A Certain Science. Judging from the information fed back by Yujiro, it is estimated that before the completion of Clannad, Eiji Niizuma will be able to complete the manga manuscript required for serialization based on the novel provided by Makoto Takahashi, and even if it is a bit exaggerated, he can complete A Certain Science serialized in the monthly magazine in advance. However, this does not match the original plan made by Makoto Takahashi. So when Yujiro was busy going back, trying to deepen the emotional exchange between editor and cartoonist, Makoto Takahashi didn't say much, but as soon as Yujiro went out, Makoto Takahashi immediately took out his mobile phone and got through to Eiji Niizuma, who was still busy finishing the manga draft over there. Hey, King of Black Flame, I see that your servant has rebelled. Although Yujiro repeatedly asked Takahashi Makoto, Yoshida, and others before leaving, not to tell his new wife Eiji about coming here today, Yujiro said just after leaving, Takahashi Makoto decisively sold Yujiro. Just now, your servant actually ran into my barrier and tried to stop you by lobbying us. Sure enough, did Yujiro-san go to the Phoenix Academy teacher? Nyaizuma Eiji seemed to have anticipated such a situation, and there was no sense of surprise in his tone. Then Yujiro-san wants to convince the Phoenix Academy teacher, are you here to prevent me from completing the comic manuscript? Obstruction? Are you talking about your recent hot-blooded behavior, King of Black Flame? Makoto Takahashi showed a disdainful smile. Why should I do this? Although what you are doing now, King of Black Flame, is indeed it slightly interfered with some of my previous plans, but I'm not bored enough to stop you for such unreasonable reasons. As expected of Mr. Phoenix Institute. There was no questioning of guilt as expected. Eiji Nyaizuma expressed that he was quite happy. There was no fatigue from drawing comics for a long time in his tone. Hey, Mr. Phoenix Institute, I have finished it now already. Wait, it's not the right time to talk about this topic. Makoto Takahashi suddenly raised his voice, turned to look at Yoshida who looked innocent next to him, then covered the phone with one hand and moved aside quickly, so that Yoshida could hardly hear it. The voice that arrived, continued the call with Eiji Shinzuma in a low voice, as a lackey of the organization, my family cat is watching with eager eyes. Regarding the comics, we will talk about it when we meet later. Hey. I'm sorry to say that, like a child who wanted to show off but failed, Eiji Nyaizuma complained on the phone with some depression, and then immediately changed the topic to the issue of serialization, speaking of Phoenix teacher from the college, regarding the serialization time of a certain science. Now is not the time. Makoto Takahashi decisively refused to tell Eiji Nyaizuma about the serialization time of a certain science. However, considering that it would affect Eiji Nyaizuma's morale, Makoto Takahashi thought for a moment and gave the corresponding response. Although the specific time has not yet been determined, what can be said is that the serialization of a certain science must wait until I implement the plan. Before that, King of Black Flame, you just try your best to paint. After Yoshida heard Takahashi Makoto's words, while keeping the corners of his mouth twitching, he put his hand on his forehead. Yujiro obviously hopes to persuade Eiji Izuma to take a break through Makoto Takahashi, but now, why does it feel like the culprit that makes Eiji Izuma so busy is actually Makoto Takahashi? Do you have to wait for a while? I know. Although Eiji Shinzuma is very reluctant, since the comic A Certain Science is serialized under the name of Makoto Shinkai, the feelings of his companions must still be considered. But Teacher Phoenix Academy, regarding the plot behind A Certain Science, can you provide some more reference materials? Nani? King of Black Flame, could it be that, have you completed all the content I gave you before? Makoto Takahashi's expression at this moment can no longer be described as surprised. You must know that the plot that Takahashi Makoto provided to Eiji Shinzuma previously included bank robbery incident, encounter between a certain foodie nun and a certain unfortunate boy and a certain stripper Kiyama's fantasy hand incident and so on. Makoto Takahashi once calculated based on the number used in monthly serialization that to complete these contents, at least close to 12 chapters of content would be needed, which would take about 1 year of serialization. But Eiji Nyaizuma has now begun to ask Makoto Takahashi for a follow-up to A Certain Science. This means that Eiji Nyaizuma has completed the comics needed for a year's monthly serialization in less than a month. Quantity. Faced with the almost monsterish behavior of his new wife Eiji, even Makoto Takahashi, who has a cheat finger, can't calm down. Nothing to say. Although I have finished the plot of Kamijotuma Saves the Foodie Nun before, and I am already halfway through the bank robbery incident, but after watching the railgun experiment, I suddenly felt that there was something wrong, so, After discarding most of the manga manuscripts that I completed before, I am now refinishing the manga manuscript of Bank Robbery Incident. Although Eiji Niizuma was on the other side of the phone, he described his recent work in 10 minutes. It was said in a flat tone, but both Makoto Takahashi, who was communicating with him, and Yoshida, who had started to continue the great career of peeping over there, felt Eiji Niizuma's serious and persistent attitude towards the manga A Certain Science. Because I was dissatisfied with the previous content, I gave up the half-finished manga draft and redrawn it, not to mention ordinary cartoonists. Even the good friends Ajumu may not be able to do this kind of thing. Come out, a certain blue boy /U0026, a certain yellow hair. Damn it, why do our names appear in a place like this? What's more, the manga manuscript that Eiji Niizuma wants to complete is not only A Certain Science, but also the manga manuscript that will be serialized in Shonen Jump. In that case, regarding the follow-up plot of A Certain Science, I will ask Sabas-chan to send it over. Although I learned that Eiji Niizuma's speed in completing the manga manuscript was not as exaggerated as I imagined, Gao Qiaochen was not relieved by this. After a brief silence, he agreed to his new wife Eiji's request and ended the call at the same time. Hey, Chen, is this really okay? Yoshida took the lead in breaking the silence and looked at Makoto Takahashi with worried eyes. Let's not talk about the hot-blooded and desperate attitude of Eiji Shinzuma. I remember you and me before. I said that you seem to have not finished the follow-up plot of the comic A Certain Science. Yeah. All the plots I wrote before have been given to the King of Black Flame. After Makoto Takahashi admitted lightly, he fell into deep thought. Then you just said that you would publish the follow-up content of A Certain Science. Yoshida, who was mid-sentence, seemed to suddenly think of a possibility. He looked at Makoto Takahashi in disbelief and asked with some worry. Could it be that, Chen, you want to? Isn't this very interesting? After Makoto Takahashi exited his state of contemplation, an excited smile filled his face. Since the King of Black Flame needs it, then I will also. No, he interrupted Takahashi Makoto's words rudely, and an angry Yoshida roared at Takahashi Makoto, Chen, you have to know that you are serializing weekly and monthly magazines at the same time. Instead of spending time writing the follow-up plot of A Certain Science, you should take a good rest. Don't forget that you stayed up late to finish the comic manuscript. Hey, my beloved cat. Makoto Takahashi raised his head and looked at Yoshida, with the same smile on his face. It seems you don't quite understand the current situation. I don't need to understand anything. Yoshida's attitude this time was extremely insistent and tough. However, looking at the tired look on Makoto Takahashi's eyebrows, Yoshida softened his tone and began to persuade Makoto Takahashi from another angle, and the new wife Eiji didn't talk about it. The plot you provided before, Chen, he hasn't finished all of the new wife Eiji. Since there are still unfinished plots over there, Chen, there's no need for you to sacrifice your rest time to write a new plot, right? My beloved cat, you really don't understand anything. Faced with Yoshida's persuasion, Takahashi Makoto shook his head regretfully. This is no longer a problem with the comic plot. The reason why the King of Black Flame is by saying this, you are actually declaring war on me, Cao Yat. Declare war. I discarded the completed manga manuscript and redraw it, and then while serializing it in the weekly magazine, I also tried my best to complete the manga manuscript of A Certain Science. After Makoto Takahashi briefly described the recent behavior of Eiji Niizuma, a look on his face he showed an expectant look. Not to mention ordinary cartoonists, even the good friends Aiken Mumenjai can't do this at present, right? A certain Lande /U0026, a certain Huang Mao, so why do our names always appear where the gun is lying? Ajumu Menha. I remember before. Yoshida has a good memory, and he still remembers that there was a time when Ajumu Menha, like Takahashi Makoto and Arizuma Eiji, had a dual series of monthly and weekly magazines at the same time. But looking at Makoto Takahashi's smiling face, Yoshida quickly exited the memory killing mode and stared at Makoto Takahashi. We're not talking about a Jumumenha now, are we? Still, don't you realize the crux of the problem? The smile on Takahashi Makoto's face disappeared. He slapped the table and roared, "My beloved cat, the king of Black Flame, has shown me through his actions during this period destroying the king's will and consciousness. What do you think this behavior is? Provoking, right?" In fact, Yoshida wanted to say that this was just the sudden enthusiasm of classmate Eiji Shinzuma, but seeing the look of anticipation mixed with fanaticism on Makoto Takahashi's face at this moment, the words came to his lips. In the end he was replaced for no apparent reason. "My companion is a cat, don't you understand that very well?" Makoto Takahashi said with a look of relief on his face, looking up from the window. At this time, a man should face the challenge head-on, let alone his own body. Where is the fierce demon king of the Phoenix Academy who is a crazy cartoonist? Ha 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 ha. The brain circuits of a Chuyonibu manga artist are indeed beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. Yoshida, who has given up trying to comfort Takahashi Makoto, said so. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 387. After hearing that Makoto Takahashi planned to complete the plot novel A Certain Science while completing the manga series, Yoshida thought that Makoto Takahashi would directly enter a crazy working mode, out of concern for the cartoonist's health. Thinking about it, Yoshida wondered if he needed to find the current editor-in-chief of the weekly Shounen Jump and the editor-in-chief of the monthly Music Jump to conduct a joint persuasion operation or something, and plan to use this to interfere with Takahashi Makoto. The success of this plan is still very high. As an editor-in-chief who can talk to Makoto Takahashi on an equal footing, his level of existence and his right to speak are naturally much higher than those of ordinary editors. After all, this is determined by status. This is what Yoshida originally envisioned. But Makoto Takahashi, who knows how to preemptively strike, took Yoshida with him directly to the editorial office of the monthly magazine Sure Victory Jump before Yoshida even started to implement it, aiming directly at the man whom Takahashi Makoto called the commander. Editor-in-chief. Yoshida, who initially thought that the plan had been exposed, tried to persuade Takahashi Makoto to give up the plan along the way. However, when Yoshida's third attempt to persuade him failed and he regrouped and prepared to start his fourth attempt, Takahashi Makoto pulled out the gun with a smile. Demon sword, with a look on his face that said, "My beloved cat, you have prepared your last words." He just looked at Yoshida quietly without saying a word, and then, nothing more. Yoshida, who has long been accustomed to facing the mental oppression of Makoto Takahashi, is 10,000% sure that Makoto Takahashi will not kill him, or even be injured, but, if a man without clothes suddenly appears on the street, this kind of news will definitely make the headlines. After pre-reading this possible world line from the eyes of Makoto Takahashi, Yoshida decisively stopped his stupid persuasion. However, the situation is not as bad as Yoshida imagined. Because Takahashi Makoto went to the editor-in-chief of the monthly magazine Music Victory Jump not because he was aware of Yoshida's intentions and planned to counterattack, but because he wanted to complete some plans and needed the cooperation of the monthly magazine. As for what the cooperation plan is, Yoshida has no idea at all. Although he is Makoto Takahashi's editor-in-chief, the topic of discussion this time, in short, both Makoto Takahashi and the editor-in-chief have restricted Yoshida's authority to participate in the conversation. At the beginning, Yoshida was a little surprised. After all, he was negotiating with cartoonists about cartoon issues. As the editor-in-charge, why couldn't he participate? Just like when human beings are discriminated against or excluded, they will have some negative delusions. When others whisper, they think they are criticizing themselves, when others cover their mouths and smile, they think they are mocking and despising themselves. If you point fingers at others, you will think that you are discussing yourself. So because he was isolated and excluded, Yoshida suddenly fell into various delusions. I even thought that this time Makoto Takahashi came to the editor-in-chief, maybe he wanted to change the editor-in-chief or something. As I said on the phone before, Commander, but when Takahashi Makoto closed the door, Yoshida vaguely heard Takahashi Makoto's words, and his heart was mostly relieved, about the comic Clannad serialized content. Because the door was closed, Yoshida could not hear the conversation inside. To be precise, Yoshida couldn't hear clearly the conversation between Makoto Takahashi and the editor-in-chief. Although there was only a door across the room, it has to be said that the sound insulation measures here are quite good. At least Yoshida had tried very hard to put his ear to the door. Go up, still can't hear clearly what the two people inside are talking about? Of course this is only the beginning. No. Of course this kind of thing can't be done. After a brief calm, Yoshida, who originally thought he couldn't hear anything, was about to give up the unethical eavesdropping behavior of Walshavers when he suddenly heard the editor-in-chief calling from inside the office. The sound of hug, sorry. I'm just curious about you. Yoshida, who was wondering why he suddenly heard clearly, suddenly saw Makoto Takahashi looking at him with a smile. The door to the room had been opened by Makoto Takahashi. Hey, my beloved cat, you come in too, ignoring the embarrassed look on Yoshida's face at the moment, which made him want to use the digging skill. Takahashi Makoto just stretched out his right hand and slapped it hard on Yoshida's shoulder, as a price for eavesdropping. To satisfy your curiosity, my beloved cat, join me as a team to clear the copy of Monthly Editor-in-Chief. Otherwise. Yoshida did not immediately agree to Takahashi Makoto. After all, he did not understand the whole story yet, although judging from the unnatural look on the editor's face and the smile on Takahashi Makoto's face, the initiator of this incident definitely the latter. Chen, are you sure you want to do this? After Yoshida understood the whole story, he swallowed hard, with a look of horror on his face. After a long silence, he struggled to finish a sentence. Won't you suffer divine punishment? Heavenly punishment? Ha 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 ha, of course, such a thing is impossible. Takahashi Makoto walked to the window, pointed at the sky that was already covered with dark clouds, and his face was full of fanaticism. Hey, my cat, didn't I tell you before? The crazy cartoonist Nkuma, can come to this world under the pressure of the two major inhibitory forces of Gaia Loli and Alea Loli, which means that this world has accepted me and recognized my existence. So if you want to interfere with me, hinder me, it is as difficult as destroying all humans, or even destroying the entire planet. So, do you think that I, who have reached such an existence, will suffer the so-called heavenly punishment? Too sweet. Who dares to stop me? Who dares to stop me? Who dares to kill me? Ha 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 ha. I dare to kill you. Although Yoshida really thought so at the moment, and wanted to roar out loudly like this, but looking at Takahashi Makoto holding the magic sword in his right hand, as if he was ready for IAI flash, Yoshida finally chose to remain silent. It's a pity that Yoshida is not Madai, otherwise, with the speech that Takahashi Makoto just triggered a certain death flag, he would have been beheaded by now. Yoshida, as the editor-in-chief of the cartoonist Nkuma, I want to hear your opinion. Rather than saying that the editor-in-chief helped Yoshida out at the right time, it's better to say that the editor-in-chief's words pushed Yoshida into the abyss of a dilemma. Hey, my beloved cat, you don't want to betray your ally at the critical moment, do you? Takahashi Makoto shrugged meaninglessly, and his face showed an indifferent look, but his right eye was staring at Yoshida. Although it's very cute to turn sides at the last minute, and Infernal Affairs is also my favorite game, but my beloved cat, becoming an undying enemy with the Demon King, fighting to the death, do you have that awareness? I, I. Will you choose to defend the responsibilities of the editor-in-chief, stand in the editor-in-chief's camp, and work together with the editor-in-chief to persuade Takahashi Makoto? Or should I choose to save my life, abandon my so-called moral integrity and professional spirit, stand in Takahashi Makoto's camp, and brush the dungeon of monthly editor with Takahashi Makoto? This is really a difficult question to decide. It seems that you have made your choice. Tisk. It's really a pity. After watching Yoshida fall into silence, Takahashi Makoto, who was impatient, showed a look of regret on his face. Since you have chosen to stand on the opposite side of me, then out of respect for the enemy and care for the past cooperation, then, this day next year will be my cat's death anniversary. Hey, when did I make a choice? Don't be so arbitrary and self-centered. Editor-in-Chief, why don't you agree with Aiken's opinion? I believe you have also read the content of Clannad. I think Aiken's plan is very good. And how to say? At this time, what moral integrity and professional spirit do you still need to consider? Saving your life is the first priority. Although this approach is a bit unfair to other authors, the level of Clannad is indeed higher than those cartoonists serialized in the monthly magazine at this time. And didn't you say before that the comic Clannad even pulled Bai Sheng jump back from the brink of death? Then in return, let Aiken, let the cartoonist how Iwan Kuma be willful for once, what do you think? Crossing his hands and resting his chin, this kind of thinking is the real commander-in-chief. So Takahashi Makoto, you took out your mobile phone and took pictures crazily, do you want to go home and practice and imitate? Speaking of which, Yoshida just said so passionately, Takahashi Makoto, you are really a man to do this? Wow, I didn't expect the commander to be so reasonable. Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida, who was already ashen beside him, and smiled happily. Hey, my cat, this is really great. I originally thought that in order to convince the commander, I might need to show my bravery. I didn't expect that the commander has been our companion from the beginning. Yes, there is no need to use force. Who was it that just slapped the table to pieces? Although that kind of office desk is estimated to be almost beyond its service life, that kind of thing is not something that a mere human being can do. Yoshida followed Takahashi Makoto and did not make his usual complaints. It is worth noting that Yoshida did not walk side by side with Takahashi Makoto as usual today, but kept a relatively safe distance, and his face was full of complex expressions of surviving a disaster and always alert to the coming of death. Then my cat, follow the commander's instructions, and the negotiation between the cartoonist and the editor will be left to you. Takahashi Makoto stretched, smiled at Yoshida, and warned in a joking tone, of course, don't try to do anything. Although I will be happy to chop you into pieces and feed you to the demon dog at that time, but you have come this far, and it seems that there is no way back. Ah, it's really troublesome. Looking at the list of cartoonists and editors in his hand, Yoshida showed a wry smile. Looking at the back of Makoto Takahashi, who was gradually walking away, he muttered in a low voice, at that time, you have a brain convulsion. Why on earth did you help that guy Aiken to persuade the editor? Now we are in big trouble. Let's not talk about communicating with other cartoonists. After that monthly issue is released, we will definitely. Hey, my beloved cat. Makoto Takahashi suddenly stopped, turned to look at Yoshida with a smile, and when a certain editor was shocked, he said slowly, in view of the fact that my beloved cat, you the assistance given at the critical moment has made His Majesty the Demon King Koma the Phoenix become more friendly towards you. At the same time, I warned my beloved cat, who was murmuring that because the Koma the Phoenix has signed a contract with the Witch Rena, it is impossible to become one. If you make any delusions during the strategy or build a base, you will be automatically converted into the first enemy to be killed and eliminated. And isn't it time to say thank you at this time? Who the hell wants to conquer your Chuyunibu? My beloved cat, since you already know, I won't say anything anymore. But, don't you think you know too much? I lost. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 388. Although there have been many tear-jerking plots in the comic Clannad since its serialization, it would be too naive to think that Clannad is just this level. You must know that the real tear-jerking weapon of Clannad only started after the male protagonist Tomoya Okazaki reached the peak of his life. The so-called tragedy is to destroy beautiful and valuable things for people to see. This is the concept that Takahashi Makoto has always upheld and believed in. And judging from the comics that are currently being serialized and are being prepared for serialization, Clannad happens to be the comic that best meets Makoto Takahashi's philosophy, bar none. By the way, Takahashi Makoto had previously negotiated with his editor-in-chief Yoshida to simply draw the comic Dream Eater that is being serialized to a tragic ending. For example, the male protagonist's highest classmate in the comic, after various efforts, after that, he finally completed the agreement with the heroine and successfully animated the comic. However, when he was about to propose marriage, he discovered that his female classmate was already married and had children. Of course, Makoto Takahashi only briefly discussed this idea with Yoshida. As a result, the next day, he received a call of objection from all the cartoonists, especially Landai, who is the embodiment of the male protagonist. He looked very weak, but in this matter, he actually showed a very strong side for the first time. As an affirmation of Landai's will, and as a reward for Landai's awareness, Takahashi Makoto finally gave up on the plotline of the comic Dream Eater that can obtain a huge amount of pleasure from the readers, of course because Makoto Takahashi was dissatisfied with the previous isolation and exclusion behavior of all members of the cartoonist side. He retaliated by sending some Dream Eater extras to some people on the cartoonist side and their families. For example, the one sent to the CEO's sister is Landai and the CEO's sisters, the one sent to the violent girl is the yellow-haired glasses gentleman and the siren girls, and the one sent to the silver-haired brother Fukuda is Fukuda and his new wife AG Forbidden Love and the like. After the alternative side plot of Dream Eater was banned, Makoto Takahashi could only start with Clannad. I remember when I first saw the scene where Nagisa Furukawa died in the arms of Tomoya Okazaki on a snowy night in order to give birth to Shio, Makoto Takahashi, who burst into tears, immediately deleted the animation on his computer, but this plot was like a nightmare, constantly torturing Takahashi Makoto. It was not until several years later that Takahashi Makoto finally endured the heartache and insisted on watching the entire Clannad with tears. This kind of like the feeling of the rock pressing on my chest was gradually relieved. Of course, when finishing Clannad, due to the secondary damage caused by the plot between Mitoshio and Okazaki Tomoya, even Makoto Takahashi who traveled to this world still felt a twitch in his heart when he recalled it. As early as when he first decided to serialize Clannad, Makoto Takahashi was looking forward to the story of readers being tortured into cats and dogs after this plot appeared. However, when finishing a certain episode of Clannad before, the various rebellions that occurred on the assistant side made Takahashi Makoto suddenly think that if the reader side of the current world is the same as the assistant side or even himself, because in a moment if you can't accept Nagisa Furukawa's death and stop watching Clannad, then the plan to gain pleasure from the readers will soon become empty talk. So after spending a week thinking about it, Makoto Takahashi came up with a more efficient and at the same time the most insane plan. The plot of Death of Nagisa Furukawa, the plot of the father-daughter relationship between Okazaki Tomoya and Shio from Escape to Reconciliation, the plot of Okazaki Tomoya's reconciliation with his father, and Shio who lived happily with his father suddenly died of illness. All the plots are combined and serialized in a monthly magazine published in a certain month. In this way, even if the reader is deceived by the plot of Furukawa Nagisa's death, as long as he has the illusion that the heroine of the manga will not die like this, even if he only holds this idea slightly, he can continue to observe the manga. If so, then you will definitely be tricked again. That's how Makoto Takahashi went directly to the editorial headquarters of the monthly magazine, and with the cooperation of Yoshida, he completed the incident of persuading the editor. Although in terms of results, the editor-in-chief agreed with Makoto Takahashi's crazy plan for the comic Clannad, but according to the principle of equal exchange, the prerequisite for the implementation of that plan is that Makoto Takahashi must meet some conditions. Although Takahashi Makoto has completed many manga manuscripts for Clannad before, although several assistants have complained about it, the manga manuscripts accumulated in his hands are enough to serialize for several months, but as the initiator of the plan, Takahashi Cheng is very clear that the comic manuscripts he has accumulated so far will not be enough when the plan is officially implemented. However, at this moment, Makoto Takahashi did not start to enter the mad cartoonist mode of completing the manga draft. Instead, like an old monk in meditation, he sat cross-legged on a chair with his eyes closed, sometimes with a gloomy frown on his face, and sometimes with a broken expression on his face. A smile, a deep, shuddering laugh. But when faced with Takahashi Makoto's strange state, the assistants and others seemed to ignore it. They all lowered their heads and were busy with the work at hand. After all, it was because of the massive accumulation of unfinished manga manuscripts that the assistants and others released them in succession. There is no time for complaints and panic, or is it because you are used to Takahashi Makoto's speechless state? However, compared to a certain editor-in-chief, at this time I have to lament the powerful minds of the assistants. When a certain editor-in-chief once came to report on his work, he saw Makoto Takahashi laughing wildly and wantonly. Yoshida, who originally wanted to finalize some details with Makoto Takahashi, turned black after seeing Makoto Takahashi's state. Xiandi turned around and carefully closed the door, trying to create an atmosphere that he had never been here before. It's just that escaping won't solve any problems. After Yoshida completed the task assigned by the previous editor-in-chief, despite his unwillingness, he still had to meet with Makoto Takahashi. After all, the whole plan was initiated by Makoto Takahashi. No, the more important reason is that on talking in terms of levels, Yoshida, who has barely reached the expert level, said that the gap between him and Makoto Takahashi, who is at the master level, is really huge. Compared to Yoshida, who looked a bit unnatural in his anxiety, Makoto Takahashi did not pace back and forth anxiously, nor did he try his best to complete the manga draft. He just looked up at the clock hanging on the wall from time to time. "Hey, my beloved cat, are you sure the invitation letter I gave you has been sent out?" Makoto Takahashi slapped the table unhappily. "Isn't it already the appointed time? Why is there no one there? Come on? If you can't meet the commander's conditions, about that plan, huh?" As expected, Sabas-chan should have been responsible for this from the beginning. "My beloved cat, you are responsible. The editor's soul is crying because of your incompetence. Do you blame me for this kind of thing?" Yoshida looked at Makoto Takahashi with a depressed look, and spread his hands helplessly. For ordinary cartoonists, whether it is the plot or the completion of the manga manuscript, monthly serialization it's much more troublesome than a weekly magazine. Under these conditions, Chen, how many cartoonists do you think would be willing to complete half a year's serialization within 3 months? Huh? Is that so? If this is true, it only means that those little animals do not love comics deeply enough, and their faith in the cartoonist, the god's agent, is not devout enough. Takahashi-sana, I didn't agree with Yoshida's statement. I may not be sure about the thoughts of other little animals, but if you are a pair of good friends like Ajumu-menha, they will definitely be able to do it. Well, I'll be the first to come later. Yes, they will definitely be the good friends of Yachin Mumenjai. Ajumu-menha. Yoshida was a little confused about Takahashi Makoto's positive attitude, although the new manga of Ajumu-menha has recently passed the weekly serialization meeting, but I remember that I went to look for it before Hattori-kun was also there when Aiken Mumenha and they didn't promise to come. By the way, Chang, why are you so sure that Aiken Mumenha and the others will definitely agree? Human beings, such humble and weak creatures, Once they bear a certain belief and have a certain consciousness, their combat power suddenly bursts out, like an uncertain spiral, with the ability to break through the sky. My beloved cat, although you, as my dependent, will eventually escape the category of humans, you cannot underestimate humans because of this. Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida with contempt. That's why Ajumumenha will come, isn't this a matter of course? As soon as Takahashi Makoto finished speaking, he heard a knock on the door. Hey! Is it finally here? It's too slow. It's too lazy. You are just ants, how dare you let me? The words of blame could no longer be continued, because Takahashi Siaki opened the door and saw standing outside. The ones standing there were not, as he had expected, the pair of good friends from Aiken Mumanjai. It was Eiji, the new wife, who looked forward to it, and Yujiro, a certain editor-in-chief, who kept giggling while trying to resolve the embarrassment with a smile. Hello, Mr. Phoenix Academy. Before Eiji Nyaizuma could finish her words, Makoto Takahashi decisively closed the door. Hey, my beloved cat, are you sure you didn't make a mistake when you sent out the invitations? Makoto Takahashi closed the door, leaning against the door that kept being knocked, and asked Yoshida calmly. I actually saw the King of Black Flame at this time just now. Is this an illusion? This is definitely an illusion. For your so-called ally. Are you going too far by doing this? Yoshida sighed helplessly. Open the door. When I went to inform Ajumumenha, my new wife Eiji happened to be there, so. Hey. I plan to give the King of Black Flame a surprise. After curling his lips in displeasure, Takahashi Makoto opened the door. When the good friends Aiken Mumenha arrived, they saw Takahashi Changzheng and his new wife Eiji exchanging something. Although Takahashi Makoto met his new wife Eiji somewhat unexpectedly, the two of them, Aiken Mumenha, I have not forgotten the purpose of coming here today. But before Ajumumenha could speak, it became clear that he had directly interrupted the communication with Shinzuma Eiji, and went straight to the topic as soon as he got up. As for the basic situation, my familiar cats should have told you. Since you are here today, it means that you have accepted the previous contract. Makoto Takahashi looked at the two people who were full of doubts. Ajumumenha. I just want to ask, can you do it? Although when we first heard about it, we also found it a little difficult, but... Landai and the yellow-haired glasses man looked at each other, and then they nodded at the same time as if they had some kind of silent communication. He said, since Chang, you and Zinzumajan can achieve that level, we can also, no, we will definitely be able to do it too. Not a bad realization. Makoto Takahashi looked at the two people in front of him, then, let's work hard in the next 3 months. Oh. That's the kind of fiery look in your eyes. As expected, Mr. Ajumumenha said it best. Speaking of Shinzuma Eiji, are you really a man who makes your presence felt like this? Speaking of Cheng, the yellow-haired glasses man looked at Makoto Takahashi with a strange expression. I heard Mr. Yoshida say before that you would suspend the publication of the comic Clannad for 3 months. This is a prohibited matter, although I really want to say this, considering that you are the facilitators of this plan, it's better to reveal a little bit of information. Makoto Takahashi squinted his right eye, with a look on his face. With a ghostly smile, the name of this battle plan is, readers burst into tears and go on a rampage. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 389. Although it is actually very common for cartoonists to stay up late and work, but for Landai, it cannot be measured by common sense. After all, Landai has a criminal record. When he was serializing Detective Trap, he was overworked and the popular comic was forced to suspend publication. Although Landai tried several times after he was discharged from the hospital, he tried his best to turn the tide, but he still couldn't avoid the fate of the comic being cut in half. Although the education model in Dongzhou is obviously much more relaxed than that in Zhengzhou, for students who spend time in school every day, it is indeed not easy to serialize while going to school. Previously, Aiken Mu Menjai was unable to show strong combat capabilities, largely because of the need to balance the dual career switch of student and cartoonist. And now, even though Aiken Mu Menjai is already a professional cartoonist, she no longer has to worry about academic problems every day, and the two good friends are already married, and they don't need to worry about completing looking for that helper from the vast sea of people to reproduce the other half of descendants. This is a thrilling mission, so you can devote yourself wholeheartedly to the people. No, you should devote yourself wholeheartedly to drawing comics, theoretically speaking, whether it is from the abundance of time or from the achievement of the necessary thing in life, the continuation and reproduction of the race. Yachen Mu Menjai has been hundreds of years ahead of others at the starting line, but the real situation is completely the opposite. While ensuring that the quality and quantity of the manga manuscripts for the weekly serials are up to standard, the pair of good friends, Ajumu Menha, must also ensure that they can complete the 2 chapters of the PCP comics required for the monthly serialization before the monthly deadline. Manuscript. Although Ajumu Menha's consciousness is very good, and he is very motivated in action, but I have to say that these good friends seem to take the tasks arranged by Takahashi Makoto a little too simple. At the beginning, Ajumu Menha did not find this task difficult. After all, whether it was Takahashi Makoto or Nyaizuma Eiji, these two cartoonists had completed such a thing before. Regardless of the gap between the assistants, Ajumu Menha, who has the numerical advantage, naturally believes that what other cartoonists can do, he can also do. However, in fact, at the end of the first week, because the work focus shifted to Ajumu Menha on PCP, she almost didn't have time to complete the new manga serialized in the weekly. Although at the last moment, Lan Dai unlocked the genetic lock, or turned on the adjuster mode, and finally completed the comic manuscript required by the weekly on the deadline, but the tragedy is that Lan Dai, due to excessive energy consumption, the classmate took a break for nearly 3 days. As a result, all the previous efforts were completely in vain, and he still owed a lot of comic manuscripts to be completed. Hey, Supreme, are you really okay with this? Seeing the state of his companion, the man with yellow hair and glasses expressed worries that he had never had before. And now seeing his companion with dark circles under his eyes, staying up late again to catch up on manga manuscripts, even though the man with yellow-haired glasses knows that persuasion is useless, he still can't help but want to persuade his companion to have a good rest. Big man, although his body had begun to protest due to exhaustion, Lan Dai felt extremely awake at the moment. There are not many problems with the new comics serialized in the weekly, but the debt owed to PCP, there are already a lot of pages. If these comic manuscripts are not completed today, the PCP required for this month's monthly serialization may not be completed. Take a break, that's what the yellow-haired glasses guy originally wanted to say. But looking at the comic manuscripts piled up on my good friend's desk, I couldn't say anything. Although Mr. Huang Mao Glasses, as the original author of the comic plot, also knows that everything the good friend said at this moment is indeed the truth. If the planned number of comic drafts cannot be completed today, it will indeed seriously delay the progress of the comic, but the manga artist named Mashiro Takahiro is not a monster like Takahashi Makoto, nor is he a genius like Arizuma Eiji. He is not a sophisticated machine that can only draw, nor has he ever passed the test. The monster with human talent is just an ordinary person who likes to draw, gets tired and sick, but works very hard. Speaking of Chiren, has the plot of the new episode been completed? Lan Dai, who was worried by the yellow-haired glasses man, suddenly stopped painting and looked at his good friend over there, who was thinking about things very seriously on the surface but was feeling emotional inside. Ask somewhat seriously, although I am the one who completed the manga, Akito, you are the one who wrote the plot. Although I am very confident in your plot creation ability, Mr. Hattori once said before that the reason why cartoonists cannot bear serialization in weekly magazines is mostly because the weekly schedule is too tight and there is no time to think carefully about the plot, so you. Humph. I'm very confident about this. Although I don't know how Cheng and Zinzuma conceived the content of the comic when they created it. He pushed up his glasses, and the yellow-haired glasses a forced smile appeared on Jun's face, and he pointed at his head, but at this point, I am confident that I will not lose to them. Eh? Is that so? A smile appeared on Lan Dai's tired face, and he looked at his good friend with some suspicion, although I think so too, but Chi-Ren, if you don't consider the skills of manga manuscripts, the question is, just from the perspective of plot, what do you think the chances of winning between you and Aiken are? Ahaha, do you need to say such a thing? Of course it's my plot, I need to be more powerful. Speaking of the yellow-haired glasses man, your voice is getting lower and lower. After all, it is because you are not confident in yourself. Or is it because of lack of confidence in oneself? Hey, Akito. I don't feel at ease at all when you say that. Classmate Lan Dai naturally heard the lack of confidence in his good friend's words, and complained with some dissatisfaction, although we are now in Iya City it is being serialized in the name of Mumenjai, but Akito, don't forget what I told you back then, if the plot you provide dissatisfies me, I won't be able to draw it. So. Hey. I'm starting to work hard to come up with the plot now. The content of the next comic will definitely not lose to the plot of Aiken or the new wife. Speaking of yellow-haired glasses gentlemen, don't you dare to have such a forced smile on your face at this time. Perfunctory. Then, as for the plot, I'll leave it to you. After solemnly admonishing his good friend, Lan Dai put down his brush, rubbed his sore shoulders and took a break, then he closed his eyes and began to sort out the things on the table. Comic manuscript, but is this really a break? Putting aside the scientific nature of sorting out the comic manuscript with your eyes closed, is it necessary to talk about the progress of the comic manuscript? There are still 11 pages left, should be finished today, right? The rest is. Ever since the yellow-haired glasses guy put on his headphones and started writing the plot, he has never looked up at his best friend again. It's not that Mr. Huang-haired glasses used the charge skill to increase his level of concentration. For Mr. Huang-haired glasses, such a trivial matter as creating a story is not enough to focus on entering the land of selflessness. The reason why the yellow-haired glasses man is like this is I just don't want to see my good gay friend staring at the dark circles under his eyes and looking tired but insisting on finishing the manga. This is not the so-called gay love, and it has nothing to do with the so-called friendship. I just saw others struggling, but I wanted to help but was unable to do anything. This kind of unwillingness and frustration made the yellow-haired glasses guy have to force himself to calm down and work hard to complete the comic plot. Although when Lan Dai was hospitalized, Huang Mao and Glasses felt deep regret for the first time because of the decline in his performance in the weekly comic series. He regretted why he could only create plots instead of studying systematically and seriously. Painting, and now watching my good partner turn on this life-saving mode, the annoyance and regret have once again awakened that dusty memory and the feeling of powerlessness. But there is one thing, give up serializing 2 chapters in the same monthly issue. Whether it was Lan Dai, who was working hard to finish the comic draft, or the yellow-haired glasses guy who was working hard to write the plot, the two of them had a tacit understanding and never raised it. Lan Dai, who stayed up late to draw, never mentioned it, because for Lan Dai, even though he had completed the agreement with his CEO's sister, whether he wanted to outrightly outperform Takahashi Makoto or his new wife Eiji, Lan Dai didn't think he could do it. This level of desperate effort is not enough. After all, it is basically impossible to defeat so-called geniuses or monsters with just a human body. Then I will give up my so-called human identity. Perhaps Lan Dai had already realized this before he worked hard to complete the comic draft. After writing the plot and revising it, the man with yellow-haired glasses who was finally dissatisfied and crumpled the previously written plot into a ball, also never gave up. Although he has complained about his good gay friends many times, if he wants to beat Takahashi Makoto or Shinzuma Eiji, he should not be too anxious. However, on the surface, the yellow-haired glasses man looks calm, but in his heart he is stronger than anyone else. Everyone needs to be passionate. This is not considered arrogant. I just want to prove that a Jumumenha, who I formed with my good friends, will not lose to the monster Makoto Takahashi, nor will they lose to the genius Shinzuma Eiji. Although the monsters are so powerful that they are terrifying, and the geniuses are astounding in their talents, but the ones who can really have the last laugh will only be those human beings who have been working hard. Well, I mean the best. The man with yellow-haired glasses, who finally created a story that he was satisfied with, took off his headphones and looked at his good partner who was still struggling over there. After hesitating for a moment, he couldn't help but say, "Why don't we go find Aiken tomorrow?" "Eh? Why do you say that, Chiren?" Because of surprise, the brush paused for a moment, but when he thought about the urgency of time, Landai did not stop the brush, but quickly drew the cartoon manuscript while curious. He asked, "Is there something important?" "If it's not something very important, I would rather stay in the studio and complete the comic manuscript. And, Cheng's time may be even more pressing than ours." "I know this, but..." Mr. Yellow-haired glasses turned around and sat on the chair. After a moment of silence, he explained to his best friend with an awkward expression, "You have seen the speed at which Nazuma-kun completes the comics before. Although this may be a bit too much for you, I want to know how that guy, Cheng, completes those comics. In this way, maybe, I just think it is possible, it can improve the speed at which you complete the comics." "Is that so?" As if because his best friend did not mention a certain topic, Landai classmate obviously breathed a sigh of relief. "Maybe it will help, but considering the character of that guy Cheng, I don't think the possibility is high." If Cheng said that, he should say it, right? Mr. Yellow-haired glasses was a little surprised by his best friend's evaluation. After all, in Mr. Yellow-haired glasses' cognition, Takahashi Makoto is not that kind of selfish person. "No. Chiren, you're wrong." Seeing his best friend's puzzled look, Landai sighed helplessly. "What I want to say is that with Cheng's personality, the answer he gives must be extremely weird. Landai, you and the yellow-haired man with glasses are really a perfect match. Just by looking at each other's expressions, you can know what the other person is thinking. As expected, since ancient times, most of Cheng's friends are yellow-haired, and school days is true to me. I wish all readers a happy May Day in advance. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 390. Mr. Huang Mao Glasses and Mr. Landai had agreed and made a decision before. They planned to visit Makoto Takahashi in person to obtain the skills of quickly completing comic manuscripts and to inquire about the progress of the comic Clannad. So at noon the next day, this pair of good friends who belonged to the action group went straight to Takahashi Makoto's house. Although Landai complained to his good friends at the beginning, instead of spending time listening to Takahashi Makoto's extremely weird answers, he should stay at the studio and complete the manga manuscript conscientiously and diligently. But to be honest, it is absolutely impossible to say that Landai is not curious about the enviable speed at which Makoto Takahashi completes the manga manuscript. The two good friends of Ajo and Momenha have agreed before that if Takahashi Makoto comes up with some weird reasons and does not give a good answer, they will immediately turn around and leave. After all, Ajo and Momenha are waiting here. There are still a lot of completed manga manuscripts. There is no need to waste time listening to the arrogant remarks of a middle-grade cartoonist. "Excuse me, Cheng. We The man with yellow hair and glasses who entered the door first stopped mid-sentence. The student Lande who came in later saw his good friend suddenly dazed at the critical moment and wanted to complain, but after he shifted his position again, classmate Lande finally understood the reason why his good gay friend suddenly changed from chatty to stammering. Yoshida, who is the editor-in-chief of Makoto Takahashi, is leaning back on the sofa, covered with a thin quilt, and is fast asleep. There is nothing that should surprise a Jumumenha. After all, as the editor-in-chief of Makoto Takahashi, it is normal for him to occasionally stay overnight with the cartoonist to discuss the plot and so on. Takahashi Makoto was squatting on the table, the brush in his hand flying rapidly on the manuscript paper, but the smile on his face. This was what really frightened a Jumumenha. Hey, Supreme, Cheng is drawing comics like this, right? The man with yellow-haired glasses, who suspected that he opened it incorrectly, asked his partner next to him with some uncertainty, but the corners of his mouth kept twitching. But why do I feel that smile on Cheng's face? Does it feel familiar? As expected of a good friend who has worked together for many years, Landai immediately picked up what the yellow-haired glasses man had not finished, with a painful look on his face. The memory that he once thought was sealed, now it wakes up in my mind again. Hey, Akito, do you still remember that time, after you and Kanaya-chan got married, you invited me to your house for Christmas? Following the prompt from Landai, the yellow-haired glasses man seemed to remember something. Although he shook his head desperately and tried to deny it, his body honestly began to tremble. This was a sign of recalling a certain dark past. No, 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 Cheng is drawing comics, definitely drawing comics. Chiren, I have seen this kind of smile before. In response to his good partner's denial, Landai thought that this kind of evasion was quite shameful, and he began to explain, awakening the dark memory of his good partner in a sinister way. On Christmas Day, we were delayed because we were drawing comics, and by the time we got back to your house, it was already past the time we agreed with Kanye-chan. No. Stop talking. Please stop talking, Supreme. Such a violent reaction. It seems that the yellow-haired glasses man has completely remembered it. Kanye-chan was chanting Akito's name while cutting the meat with a kitchen knife. Lande didn't stop talking because the yellow-haired glasses man squatted with his head in his hands, but continued in a very calm tone. She sighed, it's the same. The smile on Kanye-chan's face at that time is the same as the smile on Cheng's face who is painting now. To put it simply, the smile that Makoto Takahashi, who is a cartoonist, is showing when he is drawing cartoons is the same as the smile on the face of a housewife who has begun to resent her husband after waiting for a long time but has not returned home. In order to complete the key parts of the comic Clannad, Makoto Takahashi deliberately dismissed everyone on the assistant side. In order to ensure the maximum lethality of the comic Clannad, Makoto Takahashi did not give any spoilers despite Yoshida's begging, in order to prevent because the crying of a certain witch interfered with the creation of the comic Clannad. Makoto Takahashi specifically asked Sabas-chan to escort Rina back to the demon world. Makoto Takahashi, who originally thought he could finish the Clannad manga with peace of mind, never expected that a manga artist named Ajumumenha would actually come to visit at this time. While he was quickly completing the manga manuscript and predicting how much pleasure the manga Clannad could extract from readers, Makoto Takahashi suddenly discovered that two people appeared in the barrier who should not be here at this time. People. Although Makoto Takahashi was too focused on completing the manga draft and did not pay attention to what the good friends were talking about, but from the looks on their faces, you can roughly guess that they were not good words. Hey! How dare you disturb my mood? Makoto Takahashi seemed dissatisfied with his work being interrupted, and stopped painting unhappily. The face that was full of a broken smile before was now quite gloomy. Who do you think, huh? It turns out to be Jia Cheng and Huang Mao, you two gays. If you don't give a reasonable explanation, I think next year there will be videos and photos of you two embracing each other. Will definitely appear in every corner of the world. After saying the harsh words, Takahashi Makoto turned his head to look at Sadaharu, who was trying to act cute at his feet, snorted coldly, and pointed to the corner. Originally, after Sebastian left, Sadaharu, as the guardian of the barrier, had been punished by Takahashi Makoto for putting Yoshida into the barrier. And now Sadaharu actually let Ahomyumha enter the barrier. Takahashi Makoto didn't even need to say anything. With just a look and a gesture, Sadaharu knew what to do. In the astonished eyes of Ahomyumha, Sadaharu lowered his head and uttered a wail, then silently walked to the corner, raised his front feet, and leaned against the wall. At this moment, Sadaharu was like a child who was punished for doing something wrong. If Ding Chun can speak human language one day in the future, I won't be surprised. Seeing Ding Chun making such a humanistic action, the yellow-haired glasses guy felt a chill for some reason, turned his head and whispered to his good friend next to him, "I say the highest, why don't we go back?" Lan Dai, who had been cooperating tacitly, did not answer his good friend this time, but looked at his powerful partner with sympathy, then moved his feet carefully, and instantly kept a distance of more than 2 meters from the yellow-haired guy. The highest, the yellow-haired glasses guy did not react to his good friend's sudden abnormal behavior at the first time, but when he turned his head to look at Takahashi Makoto, the yellow-haired guy instantly understood his good friend's evil intentions. Ah Cheng, what are you doing? Well, this sentence is a good choice for an epitaph, Mr. Yellow-haired glasses. Takahashi Makoto, who was jumping on the table, holding the magic sword star shattering, looked down at the pale-faced Mr. Yellow-haired glasses, with a regretful smile on his face. Should I say it is quite your personal style? Sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have disturbed you, Ah Cheng. It's too late to apologize now, Mr. Yellow-haired glasses. No need to say more. Fatal blow activated. Takahashi Makoto, is your true form Sword Saint? By the way, where are your cute little fangs? In the end, the yellow-haired man with glasses almost had his glasses cut in half, but he activated the long-lost transplantation and transferred the damage to Yoshida, who was lying on the sofa, successfully waking up Yoshida, who was sleeping soundly, thus calming Takahashi Makoto's anger and avoiding the unfortunate ending of death. I say, Aiken, why is Aiken Mumanai here? Yoshida covered a part that could not be described, and looked at the 3 people beside the cartoonist with a sullen face, and his voice was a little unnatural. Is it because you didn't come up with a suitable reason, so you asked Aiken Mumanai for help? The reason why Yoshida's face was livid was not because he was suddenly awakened from his deep sleep and turned into my familiar cat who exploded morning grumpy. It was because a yellow-haired man was dodging Takahashi Makoto's fatal blow before, and accidentally used his elbow to deal a real fatal blow to Yoshida's part that could not be described, so you can understand why Yoshida's voice is a little unnatural at this moment, right? Huh? As the Demon King, would His Majesty Hao Wing-kuma ask for help from stupid humans for such a thing? Takahashi Makoto was quite dissatisfied with Yoshida's words. My cat, as a servant, disrespecting the king is an unforgivable capital crime. Have you forgotten the contract you signed before at the cost of your body and soul? Is there anything here, Chen? Although he didn't know what happened now, Yashiro Mumanjai, who wanted to get the increase the speed of drawing comics training scroll from Takahashi Makoto, immediately intervened in the conversation with curiosity after hearing the conversation between Yoshida and Takahashi Makoto. What is the reason Mr. Yoshida is talking about? The reason for the suspension of comics, for ordinary cartoonists, it shouldn't be a big deal. Yoshida, when Tien was answering Ahomyumha, he was looking at Takahashi Makoto with gritted teeth, but for a certain cartoonist, humph. The comic is on hiatus, you mean Clannad, right? As Takahashi Makoto's project partner, Ahomyumha naturally knew what comic Yoshida was referring to, but judging from Yoshida's angry look, the good friends exchanged glances and looked at Yoshida with some sympathy, and then the yellow-haired man with glasses spoke as a representative. Mr. Yoshida, about this, Does Makoto have any questions? Of course there are questions. And they are big questions. At this point, Yoshida seemed to have suddenly changed into a different person, and actually switched his job from editor-in-chief to hysterical complaint. I want to go to the demon world to complete the hegemony that has not been completed for several eras. I want to go to the Grand Line to collect the 7 Dragon Balls scattered on various islands that can fulfill any wish. I want to complete the great revival of the Orc tribe. I want to take Magi Carp to challenge the major elf alliances and complete the task of champion domination. I received a commission from the Shushan Sword School to repair the collapsed demon-suppressing tower. I want to understand the true meaning of life. I want to live truly. After saying dozens of reasons that made Yachin Mumenjai dumbfounded, Yoshida finally came out of his excitement. These can't all be. The man with yellow hair and glasses looked at Yoshida's helpless expression, and his face was full of black lines. Holding his forehead with his hand, Aiken will publish the reason for the suspension of publication in the monthly magazine, right? Alas, Yoshida said, at this time, all you need to do is smile. It's strange that you can smile at this time. Feeling powerless, Yoshida changed the topic to another direction. By the way, Yachin Mumenjai-kun, the purpose of your coming today is. We came to see Aiken today to find out how Aiken completed the comic draft so quickly. That was the plan at the beginning. However, judging from the experience of editor Yoshida, both Landai and Huangmao Glasses have already had the intention to retreat at this moment. Want to increase the speed of completing the comic draft? Yoshida pinched his chin and thought for a moment, then spread his hands helplessly. Although it's a bit too much to say this, but Yachin Mumenjai-kun, you have to know that people are different. Some people, no, some existences cannot be understood by common sense. Aiken can complete the comic draft quickly. Do you think there is any trick? No, I can tell you with certainty that there is absolutely no trick. The reason why Aiken can complete the comic draft quickly is because. Of course this kind of skill exists. Takahashi Makoto suddenly intervened in the topic. Looking at Yachin Mumenjai with a smile, Takahashi Makoto used the tone of tricking a little white rabbit to open the door and entered the devil teacher mode. Want to know? Wow, it seems that you have already realized something. Please. Although Landai and Huangmao Glasses intuitively thought that the method that Takahashi Makoto was going to say next was unreliable, but the desire to work hard rejected the good intentions generated by intuition. In that case, Takahashi Makoto took out a coin from the pocket of his white coat. It won't be a certain scientific railgun again, right? As a spit-roasting character rather than an editor-in-charge, Yoshida's performance today is definitely worth a 10. As for the setting that the full score is 100, of course, there is no need to analyze it too much. My cat, your thinking is too rigid. No wonder you are still just an editor at this age. After Takahashi Makoto mocked Yoshida, he turned his head to look at his good friends, Yachin Mumenjai, coughed lightly, and continued the previous topic. What I will tell you next is the secret technique passed down from generation to generation by our demon clan. Since you mortals cannot interpret the language and characters exclusive to our clan, I kindly translated it into the common language of the human world. Remember this so-called taboo move. Its name is Inner Personality Awakening Technique. Back, Yachin Mumenjai, who was fooled physically and mentally, had no idea. With the high spirits before coming, he decisively chose to leave. Tisk. You are really spineless. Looking at Yachin Mumenjai leaving in a hurry, Takahashi Makoto curled his lips in disdain, turned around and walked to the table, pulled out a stack of manuscript paper, and prepared to enter the crazy cartoonist mode again. Use other people's meal time to draw storyboards, use other people's play time to outline the characters, and use other people's rest time to fill in the background. The so-called skills or drawing methods may save some time to complete the comics, but in the final analysis, they cannot offset the time required to complete the comics. So if you want to increase the speed of completing the comics, there is no shortcut at all. Hey, Chen, take a break. It seems that you have been drawing since last night, right? Yoshida looked at Takahashi Makoto's actions, sighed helplessly, and began to persuade him. Humph. My cat, you seem to be a little too polite. Well, but since the irrelevant people have left, then the next thing is. Takahashi Makoto put the coin in front of him and took a deep breath. Inner Personality Awakening Technique, activate. Crazy cartoonist Feng Guangai Yuan Kuma, now participate. Ha 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 ha, when you see the title, do you think it's a cat explaining the reason for the recent break? A cat is not so wicked as to include that kind of venting and complaining in the VIP chapter. Sorry for yesterday, dear readers, I worked overtime and got home too late. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 391. Only some people really know about Makoto Takahashi's plan for Clannad readers burst into tears and go on a rampage. At least until the discontinuation announcement is published in the monthly magazine, readers will not know. What's more, in order to ensure that the plan can maximize readers' pleasure, Makoto Takahashi specifically negotiated with the editor-in-chief of the monthly magazine and proposed that the declaration of discontinuation should be published in the issue of the comic Clannad that discontinued. Therefore, readers who bought this monthly magazine Jump did not know that the next episode of Clannad would be published in 3 months. Although when Makoto Takahashi first proposed this proposal, he encountered fierce opposition from the editor. You can issue an announcement to remind readers that the serialization will resume in 3 months, and it will only be temporarily interrupted for 3 chapters. At least I think this approach has fully considered humanitarianism and can be regarded as the conscience of the industry. What a great example! Actually, at the beginning, I once thought that when the plot of a certain comic reaches a critical moment, a sudden and unexpected twist will appear, such as killing the protagonist, or directly cheating the comic. However, considering that doing so is likely to damage the editor's side and have a huge impact on future pleasure, in order to avoid killing the goose that lays the eggs, I made such a decision. Although Takahashi Makoto's remarks sounded like a joke, the editor-in-chief knew that since the cartoonist in a white coat in front of him said this, he must have planned to do this before. This is not so much it was Makoto Takahashi who was joking, or worse, a certain middle-class cartoonist was trying to threaten himself in this way. So in the end, Makoto Takahashi succeeded in convincing the editor-in-chief. Looking at the monthly magazine Jump placed on the table, Chen Ben, a certain four-eyed fox who originally planned to close his eyes and take a rest, frowned and hesitated for a moment before choosing to give up his lunch break. Although he is a high-level member of the Daihi Club, this does not mean that Chen Ben, a four-eyed fox, will be aloof and far away from reality. Rather, it is quite the opposite. In fact, Chen Ben, who has now become a senior executive of the established animation company Daiheisha, in addition to completing the decision-making work he should complete every day, also deliberately takes a certain amount of time to read various comics and magazines. Whether it is today's mainstream weekly magazine Shonen Jump or some offbeat weekly publications. Originally, monthly publications like Jump were not in Chen Ben's hunting scope. It's not that Chen Ben has any prejudice against the work serialized in the monthly magazine, nor is it Chen Ben's personal preference. It's just because everyone's energy is limited, and no one can cover everything, even if it's as good as you can't do it without glasses. Chen Ben, who embodies his own sinister aura, cannot escape this category. Therefore, Chen Ben, who spent most of his time on serializing comics in weekly magazines, did not pay too much attention to monthly issues. And as a representative of the comic side of Makoto Takahashi's future showdown plan, the influence of the comic Clannad, at the beginning, compared with the games and animations that appeared in the same period, the gap was still very obvious. However, as the comic's serialization time gradually lengthened, Clannad received increasing attention. Although neither a certain four-eyed fox nor a certain minotaur Jisang paid much attention to Clannad represented by the comics before, since this work is an important part of Takahashi Makoto's plan, the two uncle-level existences, naturally not so naive as to ignore or pay no attention to. However, perhaps because of the idea of wanting to know more about Makoto Takahashi so that he can more easily take the lead in future negotiations, or because of the idea of understanding the thoughts of a certain cartoonist through comics, since participating in Gao Jiao in Jiao Cheng's so-called future showdown plan, since Clannad began to be serialized in the monthly magazine, Chen Ben specifically told his secretary to increase the purchase of the monthly magazine Must Win Junk. Among the comic magazines I read, the name of the comic Clannad was also added. As someone from an animation company, when observing comics, we often have to consider the possibility of cartoon animation and the market that animation will bring. Although the animation plots and game plots provided by Makoto Takahashi are of good quality, the reason why Chen Ben agreed to Makoto Takahashi's future showdown plan was largely because he watched the three fields of comics, animation, and games collide. The gimmick of competition. However, judging from the comics serialized in the monthly magazine, Chen Ben feels that the quality of the comics is slightly insufficient. Compared to the other two works, the Clannad currently serialized in the monthly magazine, although some of the previous plots do have merits, but it seems, can't be regarded as a work of the same level, right? What is the core of the comic Clannad? Judging from the plot of the previous serialization, the theme of this comic serialized in a monthly magazine should be family, friendship, and love, the ethereal emotions that human beings rely on. However, judging from the content of the current serialization, although there is a lot of friendship and family love, but in terms of love, Chen Ben feels that the comic Clannad can only create and portray this aspect at best. It's just average, nothing amazing. Although Makoto Takahashi said before that this Clannad can compete with the other two works, however, judging from the current serialized content, the effect of Clannad animation may not be very good. Chen Ben speculated that the manga Clannad is not suitable for animation based on the current serialized content. A trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes behind his glasses. If Makoto Takahashi proposed to animate this manga in the future, should I consider the consequences of the animation flop and politely refuse? Or should I consider the past cooperation and reluctantly agree? Tisk, this question is really, a little headache. Speaking of the four-eyed fox Chen Ben, now the manga Clannad has not been serialized yet, have you started to consider the animation of the manga and the market reaction after the animation? Although it is a good habit to plan and strategize, every matter has to be so laborious to think about various possibilities. I wonder if my strength will become as strong as Saitama teacher after I become bald in the future? But it's a little early to draw a conclusion now, after all, the comics haven't been serialized yet. Chen Ben thought for a moment, shook his head with a wry smile, picked up a new Bai Sheng Jump monthly magazine on the table, and began to read Clannad, which he had not finished reading before because of his busy schedule. But then again, the comic Clannad has been serialized to this day, and there shouldn't be much plot to dig out. From the plot of the comic Clannad, whether it was from the beginning that Okazaki Tomoya planned to help Furukawa Nagisa rebuild the drama club, or the subsequent plot of Fuko, or even the story of Yukina some time ago, the main plot of the entire comic actually revolves around Okazaki Tomoya's campus life. And looking at the content of Clannad serialization so far, although Okazaki Tomoya has been working hard to appear in the story of each character, it has indeed raised the part of friendship in the comics to a very high level, but such a story mode cannot last too long. Although readers can understand the character and values of the protagonist through each story, although they are constantly growing by observing what Tomoya Okazaki has gone through, although these stories may be touching, sad or joyful, but what happened to friends is not Tomoya Okazaki's own experience after all. If the plot of the comic Clannad continues to develop at this pace, then let alone Takahashi Makoto's so-called future showdown plan, this comic cannot be compared with the other two comics at the same level. So the next plot development of the comic Clannad will either continue like this, by telling the stories of Tomoya Okazaki's friends, setting friendship as the core theme of the comic, and keep it until the end, or change this model and find a new direction. There is absolutely no third way to choose. If there really is a third way, then it can only be said that Makoto Takahashi, as a cartoonist, has too high expectations and evaluations for this comic called Clannad. Although Chenben is not a cartoonist, and although Chenben can only be regarded as a comics enthusiast at most, Chenben is still very confident in his vision. This episode of Clannad tells the story of Tomoya Okazaki's pre-marriage life, and when talking about this, the story of Naoki Okazaki's father is naturally indispensable. Okazaki Tomoya, who has just made some progress in his career, is about to be promoted, but he suddenly learned that his father was arrested for selling contraband. Not only did his hope of promotion fall apart in an instant, but for Tomoya Okazaki, who has just entered society, this is a catastrophic blow. Although this plot seems a bit depressing, the next plot is Tomoya Okazaki's happy time. Tomoya Okazaki, who went to the detention center with Nagisa Furukawa to visit his father, also brought his father the news that he was about to marry Nagisa Furukawa. Although it has been revealed in the comics that Okazaki Tomoya will face Akio's test, from the previous plot, since meeting Furukawa Nagisa in high school, Okazaki Tomoya has been working hard to improve the favorability of the Furukawa family, so there is no need to spoil the test of Uncle Akio. As a reader, Chenben also knows that Okazaki Tomoya will definitely pass it. By the way, Takahashi Makoto once mentioned to Yoshida that if Okazaki Tomoya did not pass the test of Uncle Akio here, perhaps this comic, in a sense, it would be super amazing. Is the next route the love route? Humph. Just as I thought, it seems that Takahashi Makoto chose the second way. Only watching the first half of this episode, but it is enough for Chenben to make a judgment. Then the next plot, maybe, no, it will definitely become very interesting, right? After all, this is Takahashi Makoto's work. The four-eyed fox Chenben, who was caught in self-praise, did not notice that the content of Clannad serialized in this monthly magazine seemed to be more than any other issue.